All right, let's start the meeting.
I like that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Topics on the floor, because there's no audience. So I like that topic.
Real estate office.
Do we have any comments on the commission minutes from last month?
If not, I will move it and accept them.
I didn't hear any. Second time for the motion.
So there's 2 seconds.
Favor? Aye.
Okay. That's done. So we will quick today, don't we? We finish my questions first before you vote. Whoops. All right. Fun today, up and down, up and down. It's now 7:01 p.m. The public hearing is now open. The quasi judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a site design review. The subject property is identified in the county assessor's map as lot 7500 on map 4N 1W3BA. The applicant is City of St. Helens. The owner is the same. As quasi judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte contact conflict of interest to license matter? Anyone from the audience? Nobody's in the audience. Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, presentation, those in favor of the application, and testimony, those opposed, or the applicant, and final questions. Close the record, ruler the decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing, pursuant to the city code ORS 197.7635. Following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17/96.180, site development review approval standards. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulations, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed condition of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right, have a report from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today is a very interesting one in the history of the city, in that it's the first time we are reviewing a development proposal on what we call the old veneer property. Our code calls it the Riverfront District Mill Subdistrict. And so it's exciting because this is property that has been very important to the city in its industrial past. It's one that the city has been considering for an expansion of downtown for a long time. We finally had the opportunity to purchase it in 2015, and then we rezoned it in 2016 and adopted this framework plan in conjunction with the zone change. And what we're talking about is an expansion of Columbia View Park. Currently it's about an acre, and it will expand at 60%, so then it'll be 1.6 acres. And I want to talk about the framework plan just a bit, because we're supposed to look at it when we consider development proposals on this property. So the first thing I just want to point out is it was in 2016. There was a lot of planning effort, and this was kind of the right time for planning for this property. And so there was this advisory committee that was established. For example, it's discussed in there where, you know, we were kind of brainstorming with all these little pieces. But just for some of the citizen involvement history, we did have planning commission representation at the time. which we usually do on these things. But the key part of the framework plan is this slide right here. Now, something I want to emphasize is there's a lot of pretty pictures in that plan, but this is the critical one from a planning perspective. It shows the connection of First to Plymouth Street. It talks about the public access along the waterfront. And then it has some of these other rights of way that could have a variety of uses. Fortunately, tonight, we're talking about an expansion of the park. So it's all in the green area, so there's no surprise there. Our code talks about maintaining 50 feet upland from the water's edge for public access. Of course, that's pretty easily met with the park. But later on, the reason I'm showing this whole thing is we're going to have more challenging decisions ahead of us into the future. The code talks about the potential of averaging this width as long as you have a fully certain acreage. So that'll be an interesting discussion, and there's a variety of different opinions internally on the appropriateness of that. Sorry, but we don't have to get into that today because the park is open space entirely. I do want to point out something on that plan, though, for future reference. I've seen a lot of variations, pretty picture variations, where these things are treated a little differently. And there's one I want to point out that was particularly emphasized through that effort. And that is this one here with an angle with the view of Mount Hood. So the idea here is that you had this view shed from the bluff to the mountain. And in the pretty pictures I've seen, this hasn't been honored. This is not something we really have to get into, but something to think about in the future. Luckily, we're up here. So it's a little easier to rubber stamp tonight.
Mhm.
So the waterfront plan, how it relates to the park. Like I said, this is the Riverfront District Mill Sub-District. Public park is a permitted use, but it is and it would normally be an administrative decision. That, as we have usually done with park expansions, we give them to the Planning Commission as kind of a check and balance, and as a better platform for public testimony and just to engage the commission on these matters. There is no building proposed in this part of the park. A new stage is proposed in the existing Columbia View Park, and that stage is not on the docket specifically tonight. But as the Historic Landmarks Commission, that will be subject to architectural review for architectural standards, and so you will have a chance to review that stage when that time comes. So just for something in the future. The waterfront plan emphasizes pedestrian access, and that is clearly there. The plan specifically identifies a large contiguous area that will remain a public park, and talks about the extension or enlargement of the park to the south. So this expansion is explicitly stated in the plan. I talked about the 50-foot access. So I won't go into that anymore. In this area, downtown, which is typical of downtowns, parking is largely accommodated by on-street parking and public parking. So there's not a parking lot proposed in conjunction with this use. However, there is an extension of Cowlitz proposed into the park. And it was kind of modeled after the concept in Seaside, which you have seen in your staff report. And that will add 8 spaces. But with the extension of the Strand And the first, there will be considerable additional on-street parking for the park and other activities in the downtown area. It's pretty straightforward. It's been vetted by the Parks Commission, who I understand has blessed the concept. I personally was not directly involved with the design of the park, so that's where my knowledge gap is. However, Jenny is here, who has more knowledge of that can answer questions at a applicant level. And so I'm presenting it from the staff perspective in compliance with zoning and our plans, which is kind of a slam dunk, really.
Where's this additional parking?
In this area right here.
Yeah, so
That's
that,
what I thought.
yeah, it's circular there.
So it's, along here, parallel parking along here.
So I'm wondering about the cliff edge. Sometime back, we had lots and lots of public outrage from people who lived up above. And I'm wondering how that's working now.
Well, we're not proposing any buildings on the expansion. There is the stage. And a lot of that pushback had to do with view blockage.
Yes,
And
definitely.
I think when we start seeing more vertical development, we'll probably have more people in the room. And I mean, I'm sure we'll hear about it because we experiencing that, we know a lot of people are concerned and defensive about their views. In the case of the park, there's not a lot of vertical component to it. And so it shouldn't contribute to blocking any of the view. In fact, the portion that the expansion is proposed on is just kind of a dry, open swath of gravel. This will add greenscape, it'll add life, and it'll probably be more attractive to look at.
I'm thrilled because the last really angry comments I heard between the public and the city was long ago, before now. And the people at the top of the ridge along that cliff were really angry and wanted to protect their views.
That's when we were reviewing that. I think the thing that bothers me though is 8 parking spaces. That's, spitting in the ocean.
You can have a travel lane and a parking lane.
Yes.
I have a question. So we're being asked to approve this tonight,
Yes.
correct?
That's correct.
And if we approve this, is there some provision for 8 spaces being in that roundabout?
Some provision?
Is there a provision? In other words, if we approve, is there a provision that says they're going to be 8 parking spaces, or is that just a general concept we're talking about?
That is a concept. It's assumed to be 8. But the idea is that there's going to be parking in that roundabout area.
In the roundabout.
Yes, along the
Okay, I
perimeter.
see what you're saying.
So
So there'll be a travel lane on this inner circle, and then
Right.
there'll be parallel parking along it.
It's possible outside of a shaded area that could be expanded to do parking a little bit.
But remember,
Patio parking.
this, part of this is expanding the strand as well as First, which is going to add to the public parking, which the park depends on now.
So here's my point on the parking spaces is I don't know if this has been engineered, that this, the traffic flows and everything else. And one of the concerns that I would have when I look at the pictures and I see the design of this is that a lot of people are gonna go down and try to see if they can find a spot within that circle to park. Because it's gonna be right up front, right by the park. And what we may end up getting is just a lot of traffic through that one circle looking for the parking. And that it's I don't know how many spaces it's actually providing, but a better flow potentially could be that that's a white zone where people could drop people off, people could drop their gear off, people could not necessarily parking, or maybe so that's that's what I'm trying to discuss, that if we're going to approve this tonight, then we aren't locking ourselves into approving 8 parking spaces. That's something for further design consideration in the future.
I see. No, it does not, and unless you wanted to mandate that as a as part of your finding.
Handicap access to the walkway there, because a car can pull around there. There wipes out 2 spaces, so parking's not a big.
Well, if it's parallel, the standard is different. It wouldn't have a standard loading zone like a, say, wiped out 2 spaces.
Well, the in and out of, not width-wise, but just to pull in and that sort of thing.
Yeah, what you're not seeing is the broader on-street parking scheme, which does include disabled person spaces conveniently next to the park with the classic loading zone, wheelchair loading zone.
And also, I just don't know if, I mean, it's a view here, and you go down Cowlitz and you have a view. I see this picture here, page 3 and 5 of the, what I see is a red zone in the circle, and views. So that people approaching the roundabout, what they see is open space and water and views. So it's coming back and making sure that there are different viewpoints being expressed by different commissioners, that we be careful about before we put parking in there, because number one, traffic flow, do we want people why do we want people going into this space? Well, what is it gonna be the use of this space? And how's it gonna impact the rest of the experience? The pedestrians that are gonna be using the park and walking. We want people lining up with their cars, circling around, parking in this spot.
Yeah, if you've seen Seaside, the one, I guess, the picture you have, well, Saturday night, yeah, that's all they do, drive through there, so it's continuous. I don't know if the circle would accommodate this county.
Is this not necessarily, is the design, the seaside design, not necessarily the width of the circle, right? We don't know what the circumference is in comparison to the seaside. I've watched big vehicles try to make these corners in seaside, and it's difficult. And this would have to be a lot bigger because there isn't enough room for parking.
I suspect also the seaside one, you want to look at it broader, but when you have a street that is more than 150 feet, the fire department likes to have a turnaround. Because in this case, Strand is right there, it would not be needed for a turnaround. I just wonder if that's one of the reasons it is identified as no parking in the seaside one.
In looking at this plan as a big picture, do we have to have parking in there? Is it an option to say no parking?
I think it was a desire for a lot of the reasons that were mentioned about this being an accessible route into the park, because currently the access points are 2 staircases here and here. The other point of access is the county parking lot, which is supposedly for employees only, but is used currently to unload for events. This would provide a new location to unload for events. This is the new accessible route of the park. So that was kind of why we talked about supplying parking, and also for the reason Jacob noted, just we know this is on-street parking is how people park for this park. So if we can provide more on-street parking in proximity to the park, that's great. OTAC is our engineer who's working on the actual traffic circle engineering to make sure that turning radiuses work for trucks, as you mentioned. I'm staying a little bit quiet on the engineering part because I'm not managing that project. I'm just managing the park improvement project.
What are the wings up at the top of
These two? Yeah, so I think these are classified as sort of gateway elements. This is going to be a grand entrance to the Riverwalk, and so they could be places for artwork in the future. They're just set aside areas for future gateway treatments.
You know, historically, there was a fountain of some kind in the street as you're coming out of Cowlitz. We don't know if it was livestock that drank out of it or people drank out of it. Look at the old pictures and there was a fountain right in the middle of the street.
Really, yeah. I mean, that's the type of treatment we're hoping for. I know they're planning for at least an outlet, like a conduit will be wired here, so maybe you can light up sculptural elements, maybe water elements. You know, that's TBD. There's spots for that. The other thing about turning around in this location, so this is, I feel like this is a little bit aside from what you're deciding tonight. You know, you're deciding to approve the expansion of the park, but I'm happy to talk about it along the Strand here too. So there will be a design for street closure arm bar that will come down for things like 13 nights, and this will become a pedestrian only vendor space like it does currently today. Right now it's we use temporary cones with string basically to block vehicles off right about at the Thai restaurant. So we'll have that formalized with an actual bar that comes down. And so this turnaround is an ideal spot if people come here and realize, oh, it's closed. You know, you can turn around and easily get back out to Cowlitz in this location. So that's another reason we talked about a traffic circle.
So I am behind the traffic circle idea very much. Last summer, when it was hotter than, we came back from the coast because it was too hot to stay at the coast. And so we came here and we walked in to the park, future park space. And it was pickup, RV, pickup, RV. I can't tell you, I didn't actually count them, but I'm sure they were well above 50, probably in the hundreds, who were here for the celebration of the 4th of July.
So,
I can't imagine the public is gonna give that up. I think it's gonna be really hard to persuade them not to overflow.
Oh, you're talking about the interim use as a parking lot for the
Yes.
site?
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, parking is a huge concern for our public works and engineering department as well. And that's why we've advocated for ample on-street parking when we could have just said narrow streets, no on-street parking. I believe that numbers around 263 on-street parking spaces will be added when you extend Strand Street and extend First Street all the way to Plymouth.
fingers crossed it.
It's a lot of parking.
There will still, on wonderful days like the 4th of July, it will still attract a bigger crowd than maybe it's
That was a
designed
city
for.
sanctioned event, wasn't it? They paid for it.
yeah, that was.
Yeah, it was a tailgate party intentional.
All we're really deciding, we're not deciding on any design tonight, right? We're just deciding on the expansion of the park, or are we deciding?
Well, this is the general design that's been agreed on. And it's, yes, you're agreeing to the expansion of the park and the elements of the development code. We know it's permitted, we know we have the 50-foot swath, we know the expansion is forecast in there. You're not the Parks Commission, but parking is something discussed in there, and the standards are as needed, so that's
It's pretty big.
not clear and objective at all. But we know it's downtown, which is dependent on the public parking, and so that concept is proposed to remain. And these spaces, just like we do with other parking, sometimes they're blocked off for events. And so, for specific events, maybe they wouldn't be available, but on a general day, they would.
So what Jenny hinted on there, in the committee, the tech committee, we were talking about this whole design. There was a big entrance kind of feature here, something. And we didn't know about the turnaround at the time. And was it gonna be a big statue or, what was it gonna draw people to come down to Cowlitz to come in here? So the turnaround came up, it was like, oh boy, that's even more formal. You can come in here, turn around and go, oh, this is a cool place to go. I'm gonna find some parking. Even if there isn't parking on the circle, it's gonna act as a place to go and go, oh, it's like a seaside. You can drive around there and go, there's a kite festival going on. I'm gonna find parking and come down here. It'll act the same way.
I love the idea of the turnaround.
Yeah, and they talked a lot about, traffic calming too. It will be designed to feel like a pedestrian area, so you're not gonna whip your vehicle through here quickly. Another comment about, is this the right location to have a lot of traffic coming through here? But I think there's gonna be traffic coming through here regardless, so we wanna provide an area to turn around.
We want people to come through here, to get excited about the park.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be just a side place to park.
Yeah.
That's not the point of it.
We've also got elevation working in favor for us, so this is elevated. If you were to turn this on its side, this is elevated to the river and slightly, it gradually descends as you get closer to the river. So you're gonna see the river. This cantilevered boardwalk structure is not gonna block your view. Nothing is gonna block your view from being up here. You're gonna see the river just because of elevation.
I'm a little bit behind looking at maps like this. When you're talking about elevation, I'm imagining the basic floor that has been there on the bottom of the cliff the whole time, the cliff and the houses above. Can you help me straighten out my thinking?
Yeah, no, you've got it right. The natural elevation of the site currently slopes towards the river. So you're higher up, the further away from the river you are. So that's working in our favor.
And the bluff with the houses are a couple blocks away from this.
Catherine, walk down the middle of the street between the pub and Klondike. Keep going straight and you'll be standing in the middle of that circle.
Why is that there before?
Well, I'm just saying, there's no height.
No.
It's not blocking anything.
So are we gonna see more of this,
That's
next to the south? There'll be another proposal design, is how it's gonna go, piecemeal like that? No, I'm not saying it's bad or anything, I'm just
Oh, for the
saying.
park expansion component?
Yeah, right.
I don't know if there's gonna be,
Any overall plans that, might say something about what we're looking at here?
Well, I could say at least for the Riverwalk component, as we gather funding and start implementing the public access component, that may be considered park expansion. This could be just all one big linear park along the water's edge
Right.
eventually.
But there's been no discussion on the future of what the designer want to do that direction.
Well, there's a 30% design for the Riverwalk, and that's where we're leaving it. Yeah. Phase 2. Yeah, there's 30% design for phase 2, and phase 1 will move to construction.
But we're gonna come back to the stage.
The stage will be a building permit that gets submitted this year, and you will review it for
Okay,
architectural
that's, yeah.
I read that the playground's all gonna be redone.
Yeah, so this area, we were originally keeping out of the scope. The playground's fairly new, it's about 10 years old, which is fairly new for equipment in the city of St. Helens. But as we started digging into this, we realized it was difficult to kind of design out a rectangular area and just not look at it. We were hearing comments that it's very noisy during events to have kids playing and screaming that close to the stage. So we've enlisted Mayor Reed, who's the one that developed this site plan, to look at redoing the playground and kind of shifting it towards this green space area. So the playground might be a more natural shape as opposed to just a rectangle. And it might be just like smaller features that kids can kind of wander through. And it will be playground elements that support a wider range of ages. But the splash pad will remain. So anyways, yes, this component is being tweaked. It will still have playground elements. It may not be this exact footprint, but it will be in the expansion area.
the other alternative was to have more rock music where that screaming is more.
Yes, yes. Heavy metal, huh?
So,
Do we have any more questions of staff? And we're kind of been almost getting into discussion, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
Why are we not hearing this part of the project for the Historic Landmark Commission and we are for the stage because it's not a structure or?
Yeah, so it's not a historic site. and there's no building.
I would agree, disagree on that it's not a historic site, possibly there's no
Well,
building.
it's not a historic site as designated by our comprehensive plan. Yeah.
Things did happen here historically.
Well, yeah, so it's not a, what we would call a designated landmark.
Which, I'm sorry, your question again, Jennifer, I missed
My
it.
question was, why weren't we reviewing it like we were the stage for the historic landmark?
Or like we are for the plaza later,
Right, for the
aren't we
plaza,
looking
yeah,
at this
right.
for,
Exactly.
Plaza meaning the stage and
That
the.
out here,
No, no,
plaza out here.
We're on the meeting.
Warehouse plaza right here. Oh, I see, okay. So
That is
will
a-
the stage and dance floor area come before us later?
Yes, correct.
That's what I were clearing up.
We will not have a repeat of the Bennett building.
Mm-hmm.
So, this design is at a 30% level, it's conceptual, it will get refined to 60%, lighting fixtures, benches, like very detailed specs. And then move into construction documents. Those rounds of revisions will not go back before this body, that you're approving the concept, you're approving the components of this Columbia View Park expansion.
So I do have a question about, since I know we're approving generalities here, but I have a question about the playground and, I was at a lot of 13 nights last year, and frankly, seeing the children playing on that playground equipment following the COVID security tape on it was, I have to say, one of the most refreshing and joyful things that I've ever seen. And, I heard a lot of music and I never even thought about the kids. And so I do think that we have to make sure that there are ample
Oh, yeah.
facilities for children to recreate in a safe environment while their parents are here and other people, which does mean that kids are gonna be having a lot of fun and making noise. And so I am trying to figure out, I mean, I understand that there are voices expressed, the kids are noisy, but there are other people who are gonna say, that's what kids do, and it doesn't bother me, and we're down here for a community, and where are the kids gonna play? And so I am trying to figure out how are these priorities of the design element being fleshed out? And
We're not taking away the play equipment. We're shifting it over and installing new play equipment that is, 2022 level play equipment, not 2011 when this was installed.
I think we're gonna move the playground closer to the
Look at the
parking.
footprint of the playground.
Mhm.
It exceeds the conceptual footprint of the stage and the dance floor where the adults will be dancing. So, I mean, that's a pretty good section dedicated to playground, if you look at the full area,
I'm
as well as being central.
that's not where it is now,
That's where it is now.
That is where.
right? But I thought it was gonna move over.
Yeah.
No, it'll still include portions of this area too. I'm just saying that the desire to kind of merge the new with the old and shift that direction as opposed to shifting towards the stage is where we're going.
You're not gonna have a noise problem with the kids as long as you get the speakers.
Yeah.
the Area
Yeah, the sound system.
pointed in the right direction away from the kids.
Mhm.
The kids aren't gonna have megaphones sit there yelling and screaming.
But like the playground is shaped where it is and where it is because we're limited by the space of the park now. The expansion has a little elbow room, maybe we could squeeze a little bit, a little more room for viewing of the stage. But be able to have some flexibility in how the playground is shaped. That's the main point. Not necessarily to send the kids in the backyard, forget about it. It's just to have migration, like you're saying.
So one other question or comment is, I do think that this is primarily a park, right? This is a park portion of the river expansion, this area that we're considering.
Yes, public park.
Right, okay, and so the Parks Commission is gonna be looking at this and commenting on this as
Yes,
well. Okay.
probably more so on the playground equipment as well, picking out different elements of the playground equipment.
Parks Commission has already seen and blessed this concept.
Yes, they've seen this exact drawing.
Okay, so just further, as we move forward and we start thinking about the width of that circle, I just think we should have a little more data on should we have this place where there's gonna be no parking except for unloading and loading, and versus parking. That's how we wanna, I think, make it more for people and not necessarily for vehicles. And these are things that potentially perhaps should come back our way around before final decisions are made.
Let's go on to the hearing here, till we get to this discussion period. More the discussion, anybody have any more questions of staff? This is kind of different, well, we have an audience, so. Anybody in support of the application?
It's me.
Do you want?
Yes, I
Well,
am in support.
your name?
Sorry, I'm not sure.
Say your, or you don't have to.
Of course, I'm Austin Tanner.
Just a minute, you're on the other one, aren't you?
I might be, I'm not sure what you are.
Yeah, you're on hearing number 2. You're after this one.
Oh, so I'm
You
not.
can speak on this.
If you have an opinion.
Oh, on this?
Oh, yes.
I was just thinking, I've been to Seaside and I've never parked where I wanted to at Seaside. But I've always drove in and I'm like, this is beautiful. And then you're really willing to work towards wherever you can park in order to be there. So anyway, that's fine.
You have mutual testimony also?
It gets really strange. Who knows what's going on? Yeah, I think it's great.
Does the commission have any final questions? Hearing no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, vote the record is closed. This matter returns to the field for deliberations and oral discussion. Okay. So, work.
See that the motion was made on this, do you want something to put in? Having parking? Is this a non-parking, a loading, so to speak?
Well, I think the final loop in that 0.6. I think it's gonna, well, so there's no more questions, so I don't know when this might come back before us again,
I'll
so.
tell you where I'd like loading in the county parking lot.
We can talk to the staff.
We can, the hearing's closed, so.
Yeah, it's, well, so the hearing is when you ask questions, you're gathering facts, and then the hearing closes, then it's deliberation. So then, okay, we unload all those facts and try to make a
We can have
decision.
discussions with the staff about
Oh, okay, all right, well, I just, my opinion for me is that the final, that seems like a very centerpiece coming down Cowlitz, and it's gonna be an impact piece of this design. And so I think that further consideration of the balance between parking and loading and unloading, it helps to get some additional data on it
So the.
for further discussion
Yeah,
by the planning commission before the final decision's made. That's my thinking on that loop. That's it.
well, I would say there's time sensitivity to this decision. And I didn't talk about this before, but one of the reasons we're moving on the park expansion is for use of park SDC funds. So our Parks Master Plan classifies parks into different categories. And Columbia View Park is considered an urban plaza park in the master plan. And we're deficient in acreage for that classification. So if we add acreage and become not deficient in that category, we can use park system development charges to fund park improvements within this park. We need that money to be able to do these improvements. And the only way to do that is by expanding the park. And we need to start spending money on the playground design. We've already approved the scope of work. So this really can't be delayed.
Talking about whether we put parking in and how wide the street is, that's it. So
Well, so isn't this decision of the planning commission, this concept
Yes.
of expanding the park, having a turnaround, part of the expansion. And that's the main element of our decision.
And
The design of the final design of the park, turnaround, all that is not in our decision.
That's right. The city is the applicant and we have proposed this application. So you don't get to make decisions about what is on the application for tonight. If you disagree with the application's components, as it relates to the staff report, parking is in the staff report. If you disagree that 8 parking spaces shouldn't be provided or should be provided, that is an eligible thing to discuss and make a decision about.
We recommend, I don't know if policy is the right word, but recommend that during the events, it's a loading zone only. So we could approve the parking for day to day, but not during, if we're having an arm come down on the fender,
Yeah,
if we could limit that to a loading zone during events.
It's a procedure, operational type thing.
That's still very specific, not necessarily the decision I think we're
The
asked to make here.
The plans for this traffic circle are at a 90% level and there is parking proposed in that traffic circle. So that is the proposal as it stands today. There's traffic and there's a traffic lane that is through travel and there is parking along the edge. And it's been designed by an engineer.
okay, I feel that I'm glad this came to us when it did.
Yeah.
But we are really so it's at a level where it's gotten to this point, and so we're really sort of left with our personal opinions in some respects about, and our personal experiences about different areas we've been in, about how traffic flow should be, and I guess since we're deliberating, I'll say I've gone to a lot of places, and I've been to a lot of public areas down by water. And I think some of the most important things are preservations of views and avoiding traffic congestion, especially in pedestrian areas. And so, in my opinion, having parking in that loop is contrary to views, number one, and number two, to traffic flow. People are going to want to come down and drop off people that have a hard time walking, that they're gonna wanna load their gear. They're gonna want a place to do that, and having a convenient place for people to come down by the water to get that done and then move off to find parking in other places, I think will facilitate the overall use of that area. And I foresee, in my opinion, without the benefit of the traffic engineering study, and we don't know what design criteria the traffic engineer was given, I foresee there being issues of traffic jams where people are just stopped waiting for a place to open up so they can potentially park. And then this openness and pedestrian friendly becomes more of a traffic thing. And so so in my opinion, since we're deliberating, I would say that I would go say no parking in that loop, since that's the decision that's being put before us. And that we would come, that would be my suggestion that we would make as a planning commission to the city, and then they could do what they wanted. They could either say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, we don't need parking there, or no. But since we're asked to comment on this, and That's my deliberation
I'd like
speech.
to ask you about the circle. So I'm trying to understand what you've just said. Are we visioning that the car will come in and drop the people off and then go somewhere else?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's 8 spots there. So what we have is, you've got Cowlitz Street. So you can see that picture where if you're coming down Cowlitz, you're gonna see this beautiful river and this beautiful park. And so what are you gonna do? You know you're not gonna be able to park there, right? So you're either gonna go right or left and go find a place to park. But if you need to drop your family off, elderly, children, umbrellas, tables, lunches, sodas, all the things that people have, and you go past these beautiful artwork, go past this beautiful other piece of artwork, you come in here and you find a space, you drop your folks off, and then you leave. And that's the flow. And then some people, like I think Dan said, and this gentleman here said when they go to Seaside, they love going through this loop. And maybe they just drive through and go, oh my God, this is a beautiful view. Look at all the good people. They're having a time. And they just kind of go through and they go in and out and look at the beautiful scenery. And then they either are done for the day because that's all they wanted to do, or they go find a place to park. My concern is where you have 8 spaces around here. Somebody sees, oh, somebody's loading their gear. Okay, they stop. Now this thing is blocked. And they're waiting for these people to load or unload. And then they have to park and they have to get in here, and then, or somebody just says, I'm just gonna hang out and I'm gonna wait. So just, I guess I'm foreseeing that as being a potential issue. And so the better use is come in, you drop, and you go, and you go find something.
Fire trucks and emergency equipment to be able to move in and move out. You can't have the parking and people waiting for a parking spot.
And if there, that's a good point that she was making, that is, if you do need emergency services through there, then come in and potentially pull right up. So that's what I'm talking about the flow. And so if you're walking around this area, right? So you're walking around, this is an area that's got pedestrians and people are going down here. Your experience isn't this potential traffic. I look at this as potential traffic jam. That's me. That's
No,
today.
I like what you're saying, but I'm wondering where we put the cars. If they're not gonna be there in that formerly huge parking lot, where are they gonna be?
Well, it's 8 spaces out of hundreds.
I don't know, expansion.
Along your thoughts, I do think that there probably should be some consideration for a parking structure.
It doesn't seem like the design of what Steve's proposing is different than what the city's proposing. He just would like the outer edge to be programmed for loading only as
Correct.
opposed to parking.
Correct.
Because if you don't build a
That's-
loading zone into it, then you're just gonna have the travel lane and have a traffic jam as he's describing. So I think what you're asking is for this, this to be signed as loading only.
So
Still going
that's-
to be
that's what
parallel
he's
parking
saying.
spaces.
So an example motion would be to approve the expansion of the park with the recommendation that no parking be allowed in the roundabout and that it be a loading zone only.
That's what I was
Just the
asking,
second part.
if
loading
that
zone
was the
only.
recommendation.
That would be one, but I want to hear if
Designing
anybody
it
else has
for parking
deliberation.
program.
I don't want to be the only one that talks.
So that you're saying.
Short term.
That's what I would propose in a motion, but
Yeah,
I want to.
So personally, my preference is really more of a seaside style of really not having any cars parked up there, be able to see in all directions when you're driving in there, and have traffic coming in and out of there. I mean, it could be a lot of traffic in there, wherever we want for people to come down here. But parking just blocks the views.
Yeah.
So,
You don't think I'm gonna bring my car down and just drive in circles all day?
You would have a great view.
Yeah.
Eventually, we could have some loop route for sign for the tourism. You need to have people come down and come down and loop through here as they drive through and they go, that's a cool town. And just going by on Highway 30. and to be part of that driveway.
Deliberate.
So if we don't
Basically, we're gonna.
put a substantial amount of permanent or long-term parking in this area, where do the people go to park their cars after they've dropped their kids off?
Well, you gotta imagine, we're talking about 8 spaces out of hundreds of public parking spaces. It's such a minute percentage of total parking that 8 spaces probably isn't gonna make or break the bank as far as parking capacity.
So that's that's the turnaround. It's not all the miles and miles of cars side by side that I saw last year.
Yeah, that's elsewhere.
Still over there to the left, to be sure.
We are, this is explicitly talking about just the roundabout.
Yeah, see where it says own property? That's all trucks and cars there. All you can see.
Now, someday, the tailgating party is taking advantage of a wide, open, unused swath of land. Someday, that will not be an option when the property's built out. Right now, that's just an interim temporary use in a sense.
So it's still gonna be that way this coming summer.
Probably.
Neither of us are with tourism, and thank God, because there's so much drama in tourism, it's unbelievable. And there's police, fire concerns. I don't know if it's gonna happen, and I don't think we wanna get into it.
Not if we can avoid it.
You got a comment?
I like the idea of what was suggested, that we approve the expansion with the exception of no parking, and it's a loading zone.
Want to make that proposal?
She just did.
I'll second it.
And it's recommended for.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So to approve the expansion of the park and the recommendation for loading zone only, not long-term parking.
Yes.
Right.
And they've already designed the loading spots.
It would be so easy to paint the curb and put signs in, I'm not concerned.
It's designed enough to hold cars in the loading zone, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was always the intent, to have, be able to load for events, so it's no different, yeah.
So we've got a motion
And
and
a second.
a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Good job, Jacob
Hopefully
and
yours will
Jenny.
be easier.
Well, good job.
You can always change your mind. If you have parking spaces there, it's kind of hard, because then people are like, what happened to parking spaces?
Right, it's hard to go the other way.
Oh, I got one last thing, the final thing is the final written decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice of decision will be mailed to all persons who testified or submitted comments, and the appeal deadline will be included in the notice. For me to sign something?
Yes.
I thought.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Down here. Fine, so that's a wait till the next one.
Now we can talk coffee.
This one's yours.
I'm a little concerned now. Tough crowd. I was pretty confident going in here, and now I'm feeling a little trepidation.
I'm just down the block, down the block from you, so.
It'd just be,
All right. It's now 7:53 PM. The public hearing is now open. It's a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a conditional use permit. The subject property is identified in the county lot 3400 on map 4N1W4AC. The applicant is Austin Tanner. The owner is James Mask. Because the quasi-judicial proceeding requires the service of certain procedural formalities, it will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest or bias in this matter? I know we can't get belts anymore there, or vacuum cleaner.
I field those questions 24/7 now.
Can you clarify that the owner is different than the applicant, and the application it says same as applicant? It changed.
We'll ask the staff about that.
Ownership changed. So you just closed on the property?
Yeah, we're doing the notary and the trust next week, this coming.
Yeah, let's be careful about questions out of turn.
So we have, it's kind of a semi-formal here, it's being kind of formal, so we'll have time for you to speak and.
Oh, excuse me.
That's okay.
It's okay, yeah. There's not a bunch of attorneys, but
Right. No, that's fine. I
In
want
practices.
I want to play by the rules.
We'll ask about that. The, the expert party contact conflict, does any member of the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? You can talk now if you want to. No? Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application. Neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close the record, deliberations and decision. Probably won't do all of those things. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.7635. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.100.040 conditional use permit approval criteria. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulations, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. So to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff?
yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a unique property in St. Helens. And that is, it's the only one I can think of that is surrounded on three sides by developed public streets. So it's this unusual property, 3,000 square feet in size, triangular in shape. And for any of you who have lived here for a number of years, you probably remember it as Soot Busters. It was Soot Busters for a long time. It was Soot Busters, I think, a long time before I even started working here in 2007. So, and it's been like that for a long time until very recently. In fact, until it was purchased by the applicant. The applicant is not in the chimney or vacuum business. He has a different business. And so naturally, he purchased the building and wanted to do something different. Earlier this year, they applied to put in small scale coffee roasting in the side with the that's painted white now and the fancy new door. And now he is back again wanting to legally establish a dwelling unit on in the other portion of the building. Now, a brief history of zoning. When this was zoned Holton Business District for the first time, around 2009, I think, may have been 2008. Back then, there was a concern from the commission. Well, the concepts were developed before the Great Recession. So things were crazy. There was housing being built over. There was a concern of the commission at the time. And it was a discussion before I was even here. But the concern was that we were going to lose all this commercial area to dwellings. And so dwellings were not allowed on the ground floor at all. And we dealt with that for several years, and we realized, wow, we just created a bunch of non-conforming single-family dwellings, which can't be used as single-family dwellings, and this may contribute to blight. So we changed it. We said, okay, we think this was a mistake, and that was several years ago that we changed it. In fact, I'm not sure if you were even here yet.
When dwellings were allowed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But did we change it while you were here?
Yeah, I remember calling people and talking to them about it.
Okay, all right.
Totally.
So it's I don't know, 5-6 years ago. That helps me
Yeah.
with the timeline. A lot's happened over the years. So dwellings are once again allowed on the first level. So why is this before you today? Why is there a public hearing? And our code says that a dwelling unit on the same level as a non-residential use is a conditionally permitted use which requires the public hearing. So the fact that it is in conjunction with the non-residential use is why we're here. So that's what kicks it up to this level.
Repeat that because I got lost. It sounded like you said the same thing twice. So it was approved to have the dwelling units on the ground.
I'm talking about the zoning district.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the zoning district generally. So when it was originally conceived, residential use on the ground floor was prohibited.
Yeah.
And we changed that about 5-6 years ago to say, okay, residential on the ground level is okay, single family dwellings are okay, duplexes are okay.
On a lot, not necessarily a particular building.
That's correct, yeah, we're talking about general zoning.
Okay.
And then the other thing in general zoning is a dwelling unit on the same level as a non-residential use. It could be the first floor, it could be the 100th floor if we had a building like that.
Okay.
But when you have that mix of non-residential and residential on the same level, that's where we need to include the planning commission. That's the conditionally permitted use. And so that's why we have this conditional use permit that's proposed and why this matter is before you tonight, because that exactly is what the applicant is proposing to do, establish a dwelling unit on the same level as the coffee roasting use. So I won't cover all the details in the staff report ad nauseum. Of course, you can read it, but I'll cover a few things. So we always get excited about parking. Parking, it's just a never-ending subject. In this zoning district, we have a provision, and the provision is to prevent punishment of old areas of town which may have been developed under different parameters. But it says when the building occupies more than 50% of the land area, then additional off-street parking is not mandated. And this property is really a classic example of why we have those rules, because there's really nowhere to put off-street parking. So they would need to get variances and it would be a big hodgepodge. It'd be bureaucracy soup. So there's no requirement for off-street parking. There's really no place to put it. They're dependent on on-street parking. One thing I talk about here are street trees. We always get excited about street trees. And if we have a proposal that has more than 100 linear feet of street frontage, we can consider it. There's not a whole lot of room to put a tree. In the report, I suggest considering one on the backside opposite 14th Street. Or wait a minute, I got my streets messed up. Yeah, the point of the triangle opposite. Yeah, it's 14th. Okay. But there's an existing sign there. It could block it. And if you looked at the suggested conditions, I didn't recommend that it be mandatory, but at least something to think about. So a little bit of tree stuff. We have certain buffering and screening requirements for dwellings, which are met at least on the side with the entry. And there's various photos that depict that already. This is a conditional use, so you can consider other conditions. Remember, in the state of Oregon, we have to be clear and objective with our standards that applies to residential. So as to not discourage housing through unreasonable cost or delay. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of case law that evolves over that because that was a fairly recent bill. But the conditions of approval in this, there's kind of the general validity period. We talk about making sure that the screening of the exterior door to the dwelling unit is screened year round. and saying that fencing is not allowed in the public right of way, but landscaping is acceptable. That's just a long-term performance measure. It meets that now, but if a dwelling unit was there, we want to make sure that's continued. Suggested condition 3 is about the tree. We'll see if the applicant has any thoughts on that. And another just, kind of a nerdy code thing is some codes have provisions specifically about work-live units. In fact, I hand wrote it in there, it wasn't even typed. Our code does not distinguish between the two, and so it could be a work-live unit or they could be separate. Our code does not care. So that's the summary. Hear what you got to say.
Questions for staff?
Yes.
Just questions, not discussion.
So this is the Holton Business District, correct?
That is correct.
And under 17.32.180(2)(a), dwellings permitted outright are dwellings, single detached or attached duplexes and dwellings above permitted uses, correct? So if this were a dwelling unit being proposed above a permitted use, we would be okay, but
Yeah, it would be, so let's say he was like, well, I'm gonna put a second story in this thing. So then it would be a permitted use as opposed to a conditional use. And it would be subject to site development review, which would normally be administrative. Sometimes we can kick that to the planning commission, but I usually do that for major projects like high school remodels and public parks. I probably would not do that for this one. Well, if it was a second story proposal.
so under 17.32.180. Conditional use. Following conditional uses may be permitted on application. Dwellings on the same level as non-residential use.
Bing, 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 bing. That's what we're looking at tonight.
What is the non-residential use that's being proposed for this site?
Yeah, so the non-residential use is established and lawful. That was the small scale coffee roasting use in the front 14th Street side of the building. He went through the proper land use permitting, which is discussed on page 1 of the staff report. He has also gone through the building permitting process as well. So that's already there. And I reckon when the applicant has the opportunity, we'll talk about his business ventures and why he wanted the coffee roasting there. But that's the applicant story.
Any other clarification on the conclusion or recommendations, suggestions? All right.
Anyone say?
The roasting is in the triangular portion
No, the
or the front portion
Front.
that's not baked.
yeah, if it was a pyramid, it would be at the bottom or the
Okay,
third.
that's what I,
Under the findings of staff, is now the time to ask questions about that, or can we wait?
I guess we'll have to see what the question is. Yeah, if it's a deliberating if it's just a fact gathering question, that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, I think I'll ask a few more fact questions. What's the front yard setback for residential uses?
If it was, so yeah, that's a good question. So if it was strictly a residential use, like a detached single-family dwelling or duplex, then you would have to comply with the R5 standards. And the front setback would be 20 feet in that case. If it was a multi-dwelling proposal, 3 units or more in the same building, it would be the same. However, in this case, it is not exclusively residential, and so those residential zoning standards do not supersede the whole business district standards, and thus the front setback is 0.
What's the purpose of a 20-foot setback from a residence from a street?
Air, light, and space, parking, and you could also argue it helps provide some separation from the street.
Safety of the people that live there. That there's this distance between their front door and the street.
That could be an argument for a front yard. For example, you know, a dog gets out, and if there's not one front yard or a child, to the traffic lane before you get to it, and if there's some yard, maybe you have a chance to intersect.
Let's see what the applicant has to say. That's to make a bigger presentation.
In terms of,
Well, here, just tell us if you covered everything, or if there's something more you wanted to describe, or, you know, I don't live there,
no, I'm not, thankfully.
you spilling coffee all night.
Yeah, well, honestly, the sort of the general idea was that the roasting is one of those things that because of volume, we can't do huge amounts of volume in that place. So it incentivizes someone who's gonna roast that they're able to live and work. So that was the real idea behind it. There's already a unit in there that is usable for that space. That was the previous occupant, the previous owner, which they lived and used it. So there isn't a whole lot of stuff I have to do to it, which is another side of things that I thought it would be useful. Or the other side of you know, what I'm gonna do long-term with the building would just be, I'd have to get everything and think about alternate uses. So it was just basically taking the template that's there currently and saying it's there. It'd be nice if we could use it. So it was really the motivation.
Is there an access between the coffee roasting shop?
Currently, yes,
There is.
there is currently.
Would that have to be cut off?
That would be up to building code.
I've been talking with Mike pretty extensively, just to hypothetically, so I didn't start this $600 process and find out that I couldn't do what I wanted to do. So it was really just, I had a lot of preliminary questions about functional use and what to do in order to where it was safe for the occupants.
You know, retail sales out of the.
No, sir. I have no desire to own another retail anything. I don't want to see it anymore.
Your cathedral coffee.
Yes.
Yeah.
That shouldn't deter you from coming in, though, you know? But just on there's nothing about this that is, would work for what I do, really, this building. There's parking issues too.
So just a little bit of a story. This is a carryover. It's a jerry-rigged dwelling unit that's a carryover from the trials and tribulations of the Great Recession.
So I was trying to be forthright, and actually, I think they were too. So it's like, there's been this constant desire to to keep that space so it's usable for people. So, yeah.
So do you have any interest in putting in a tree out there?
You know, between you and I and everybody who's here, the expense isn't the greatest idea for me, but I mean, from a practical vantage point, it's so close to the wires to the building. It's like, it's just like, it's right where potentially a good windstorm, it's fine now, but 40 years from now, I don't want it on top of the building and stuff. So it's just, to me, that's maintenance. It's like on top of the building, it's the foliage comes over. It's just another element that this will take.
That wall potentially, the wall potentially provide income for advertising space.
The backside.
Yeah.
No, I currently have 2 coffee shops, and really the desire behind it was our volume is at such that I just want somewhere where I can produce beans for myself. So as far as street, you know, I actually prefer if people didn't really know that it was a thing because of this sort of equipment that are gonna be in there. It's,
Can you smell it?
oh, you can smell it.
In place of
Yeah.
the paper mill, we get coffee.
Yeah, I think it's just like the computers for doing the roasting and like it's the grinders, the machines that I use to do that sort of thing are expensive. And so I would rather not draw attention to it in that respect. So I wasn't planning on really putting a lot of signage, if any signage on it at all, so.
It sounds like landscaping to hide the building would be a good thing.
Well, yeah, I guess in that respect, maybe. I guess it would depend on, I don't know where it's situated in the streets. I don't know about what's under the ground and all of those things too, so.
A lot of bedrock, it's difficult to plant things
Right.
around solid rock, but
Spaces.
I mean, if that was the decision, then it'd be a challenge, but.
What is the non-residential use that you plan for? First of all, do you plan to have a non-residential use of the building?
Yeah, it's there right now. It's currently, that's the roastery. So the non-residential use is all of the stuff that I had permitted and the building inspections and everything so that I could roast coffee in the front side of the building. So right now, currently, we're roasting coffee in the front side of the building. It's, the square footage is rough. It's comparable, the front side to the back side, what I'm proposing to do with the back side with the front side. So right now that space is just kind of like, it's redundant to me. I don't need it for anything. Like I have everything I need to produce what I want in the front side. So I'm hoping to make it into something that is, you know, it'd be nice if it paid the mortgage kind of thing, so the space.
Is that, are you in for any kind of permits on the residential side?
No, I was just due diligence in terms of just making sure that I was able to do it before I spent any more money.
When you talked to Mike, was there any question about the trespass on the north side? I mean, the corner of the building, you have a lot line that goes right through your building.
Yeah, I know, right through the side. Yeah,
And that's not surveyor accuracy, that's from the old city GIS data, so I wouldn't say that is necessarily a fact. We know it's really close and there could be some encroachment, but we don't know for sure without an actual survey.
Provide any parking on the side there that's,
On which side?
14th Street, wasn't the parking there?
Yeah, it's basically on-street parking along 14th.
well, that's in the right of way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's currently where people park.
Yeah, it's been the parking
it's
for.
been like that for
40 years.
there's sufficient amount of parking for a dwelling unit and the roasting, wherever's working the roasting place.
But that road's wide enough to accommodate people pulling in.
Yes.
Yeah, it's never been a problem, and 14th is a local street. St. Helens and Cumberland Boulevard are arterials or collectors, I can't remember which. So we would be really excited in a bad way about parking that would back up on those streets, but 14th, you know, looking at all 3 sides, 14th is fine.
Because there's another project should happen across the street, that's gonna cause parking on that too.
Yeah, the rights of way are pretty huge.
Right, okay.
You have other residential tenants?
Currently, no. This is my first and probably last commercial property. Unless you guys are kind.
If we were to, as a condition of this use, if we were to require, did you put the front door in?
I did.
I think it looks great.
Hey, thanks. Unfortunately, I painted that top right corner. I thought I was losing my mind. I painted it and I drove away and it started raining. And I came back and so that square right now, I
Oh, really? The
promise
paint-
you, I painted it.
It didn't adhere to that old sign?
And it didn't rain for 3 hours. I thought there was lots of time, but anyway, it's actually driving me nuts every time we look at the pictures. I'm just kind of going, shoot.
I thought the sign was up.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, no, we took the sign down and then I was like, I just want it white at the front but you can see the original building, see the top right corner. I saw it from all the way back there.
Oh, that.
Building.
Yeah, right there, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, this needs taken care of. I'm
That
gonna
was
look at.
taken on the 25th. What's
Yeah.
going on?
I know.
You have a picture of it. I see.
Yeah.
And you have this nice sunny day for it too. That was the day I should have.
Is it for the
The
applicant?
character of the history. It's sort of
Yeah, it's-
reflected there.
It actually needs to be filled in. There's like big cracks under it. Anyway, that's why commercial building. That's what you're getting into, right?
Historically, that building, I believe, was built as a dry cleaner.
Yeah, I think they had the
Let's see.
I don't know, the things that transition to close in the front room, yeah.
And then at one time, remember, they stripped furniture there.
I know.
Really?
Yeah.
Try
He had a
again,
bath, but he,
try again, right,
Which one?
It's a really solid building.
2 megabytes.
Like the concrete, it's a great foundation.
1525. Okay.
Oh, yeah, bedrock.
Probably.
Any other questions? Any other questions of the
Yes.
applicant?
So if we were to allow this conditional use, we were to tie it with some kind of painting and sprucing up this building.
Yeah. It's all gonna get painted. I couldn't leave it like that. You should see my coffee shop, so I'm crazy like that. I'm sorry to cut you off there.
No, I'm just trying to, I think there's a push that I think Jacob had mentioned.
That window's gonna get repaired too. Like all the windows are getting ripped out right now, so. That one, right?
So what we're seeing now, where it says repairs,
Yes.
the roasting is just behind there.
It's actually, it's sort of right behind the left of the door. So if you walk through the door, it's right in the center of the room.
Here's some thoughts about revitalizing.
Yeah, totally. I agree.
commercial districts.
Yeah,
And
100%. I really wanted the building across the street, the one that has that looks like the gas station. If I outgrow this, I would totally try and buy that because I really want that building to look nice.
Just sold.
Did it? Shoot. All right. I hope they do. I hope they don't just do something. Oh, never mind.
More.
Oh, they'll probably have free resources then. That's great. Awesome. Well, probably have a lot more resources than I do. But yeah, the idea is definitely, I'm definitely all about aesthetics. I think it should look nice. So.
Okay, thank you. There's nobody in the audience for any other kind of testimony? We have any other final questions?
Got 1,000, but I'm just,
Factual.
I don't think I have any questions.
Oh. All right. Hearing no further questions to the commission, no further responses from staff, the public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decision. So what we're just deciding is to additional use permit for having a residential unit within the building, the same floor as a commercial. business.
I think it should be allowed, but I don't like the idea of a tree. I think we scratched a tree totally.
I like the idea of a tree, but I don't think I understand the problem.
Well, even putting something there, and if someone's turning onto 13th, their house, or Columbia, you don't need anything blocking view, but he doesn't need to run out with a watering can.
The reason I encourage a tree is we want this town to look better and better all the time.
Well, I
And
think that's why the arborvitae's were put in initially, remember? Put in the patio
which,
or whatever, and then we had them put the arborvitae's in.
I'm glad he did.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah. That was part of the condition on that one.
they were satisfying conditions for a use approved 15 years later.
But what I'm saying,
Essentially.
what I'm saying is, we've already got the arborvitae's there, let's.
That's correct, yeah.
Let's stick with the arborvitae's and scratch the tree.
And that's why, in the condition, I wasn't very aggressive about, you need to require this, well, it's something to consider.
well, I'm just thinking back at the streetscape plans that we approved as they developed. Bulb outs and tree plantings everywhere.
Well, I understand that,
Why?
and
This
with
is-
that being on the corner there and it's 13.
Yeah.
And it's a merging, they're not merging, but you're coming together there. I don't think we need anything to,
The center of that space isn't even his property.
It's public right of way, which is typically where we like street trees.
Oh, so you're gonna put it there. I mean,
I was just gonna say, it'll be the city's tree.
I'll look after your tree.
Where it says D.
Remember, we say street trees for using the public right of way.
Do I get to choose what kind of tree then?
Well,
I understand. It's like, no, it's certain kinds of tree, but you can't choose it.
Big columnar and that kind of thing, can't be broad spreading.
By the time you dig the hole, it'll be about $5,000 to dig out.
Oh, I believe, that's my thought too. I looked at the gravel and that's a long way down there.
I'm not hard pushing it, I just, give me the reason why I like the
Yeah,
idea.
I understand.
The house plant out there in the summertime.
I'll throw a melted arborvitae in.
I have two comments actually.
Give you all kinds of, I can give you all kinds of native shrubs and things that would grow.
Somebody built.
Oregon grape and.
Yeah. We can put a mini volcano there.
So I have two comments. One being that I've seen your other coffee shops. I have full confidence you'll make the building beautiful, and I'm probably the biggest critic of and proponent of redeveloping our commercial area. And furthermore, I think it's within the spirit of historically the Holton Business District to have a residential unit there. So I'm okay with those things.
I would say, can I say something?
Technically, no,
Okay.
they're deliberating.
So, go ahead, Sheila, were you gonna say something?
Well, you could put a potted plant with some, that's what I said. Something
Like the city has all over the streets.
out in that.
What is it, Cathedral Coffee in Scappas? You'll see how, well, I mean, it keeps it beautiful.
Well, even the one by the UFE.
Yeah, and it's not, I just don't think I can reassure you that his reputation precedes himself on what he's gonna do with it.
Can I give him one of the containers in front of my project?
So I'm.
The city wants to put her there.
They're going away, so.
So as part of the
Okay.
deliberation though, because I do want to deliberate this a little bit. Because of the, like Jen says, of the redevelopment of the commercial district. And a risk comes with putting residences in the middle of the commercial district. Like, you just don't know what kind of residency we may end up with. I mean, we're hoping that it'll be a great tenant and everything will be great, but we don't know what kind of impact a residential tenancy will bring to a property that is essentially smack dab, right as you enter the Fulton District. It's one of the most visible pieces of property in St. Helens. So I wanted to express my concern about that. And that there are certain things that are lacking as far as the residence is concerned.
How many square feet is the residence?
It's about 1,000 square feet.
So yeah, this is a conditional use permit that we're being requested to look at, which is supposed to last 1.5 years. And
Oh,
No.
no, that's so 1.5 years is the validity period. That means he would have 1.5 years to implement it, meaning he picks up his building permit and finishes the work. Once he does that, it is vested for, you know, the life of the use.
Somebody changes it.
Yeah.
I would say, since he's conducting business right next door, he has a vested interest to make sure that
That's
it's a
right.
great tenant, and you're most likely gonna be limited number of people living there, and they just don't have.
It's not the only commercial / residential building in the whole district.
Not at all.
Many of them.
there are, and I drove down, I looked at them, and there are a lot of converted houses. This is a,
Some with residents above the businesses.
well, but if they're above the build, then that's a permitted use. This is so I'll just say that I have concerns about it, and I'm hoping that it works out, and hope springs eternal, and but at the same time, you know, you can get problem tenants in these day and age. There's, like right now, there's eviction moratorium, and it lasts through September 22nd.
We heard from Jacob, this has been a residence since the Depression, so.
Yeah, not
Well, it's
not a
not been
legit
permitted
one.
Yeah, not legit,
Not
but
legit.
a residence.
It's a one bedroom.
That doesn't mean that
It's
you
just a
as a
room.
planning commission agree that this visible building should be. So what are the conditions that we're going to place upon this use? And what kind of conditions are we gonna, we have a duty to the surrounding property owners and to this community in perpetuity to not have this spot, potentially, this gentleman is very nice and he's a very responsible businessman. He may sell it tomorrow, and we don't know who will buy it. And so this is a building that every single person who lives down by the river drives by every time they leave town and go along Columbia Highway. And every single person that comes back down, this building is on a lot that is a very highly trafficked, highly built lot. And there are business owners that surround this area. And so I want to make sure that we make the right decision here. I did drive around and looked at some other tenancies in the Fulton Business District today. And there are some that are quite a mess. They've got a bunch of junk out in front, garbage and stuff out that's piled high.
Sort of enforcement is who you call.
And so I'm just saying that we'll allow this use and it can lead to problems.
I think once he's done with the building division, he's gonna find that window sizes, egress, 2-hour separation between the commercial and residential. There's a lot of work to do. And, we may find the sidewall needs to have a bigger window or something like that. I don't know. I don't know the layout of that, but I don't think is there a lot line? He can't do much to change the street.
And I'm
It seems
But
to
you're
me,
thinking of the use in case
it seems to me,
someone comes out of trash.
well,
it seems to me though, that if you look at this thing, it's roadway, sidewalks, building, and then this area with arborvitae around it. The only place the residence is gonna have any trash or whatever is gonna be behind that screening of the arborvitae.
Right, that's.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a problem. in
I
the
don't
current
think
condition.
he would permit
Sure.
it anyway.
Okay, so staff had recommended certain findings. On A, the criteria required of the site and dimensions provide adequate area for the needs of the proposed use. I do not believe that this area, that we can still allow the conditional use potentially. But can we still allow the conditional use if we don't find 17.100.0401 under A, that staff found the criterion requires that the site size and dimensions provide adequate area for the needs of the proposed use?
Well, that is a great question. And if that question was posed several years ago, it would be more clear that it is a yes. But given recent evolutions of state law as it relates to housing, we are supposed to make decisions based on clear and objective standards. And so technically, yes, you're supposed to be able to look at each criterion positively. However, if you were considering denial, and that was the criterion that you had a problem with, you would want to make sure from a legal standpoint that the denial is based on a clear and objective issue.
Okay, so I would, this is me in deliberations. I want to support this use. I want to support the gentleman first and foremost. Most I do. But I don't think that this use fits A, because I think the size and dimensions are not adequate for housing. It's built right on the corner of two busy streets. I don't believe the characteristics of the site are suitable for the proposed use, because I don't think the site is suitable for a residential use. It doesn't fit the necessary elements for residential use. That's me and what I'm saying about it. And if it were personality, and I would every time.
And from a clear and objective standpoint, and I'm just advising the commission, if, let's say you wanted to go there, one thing you could hang your hat on is lot size. So for a single structure, the lot size, minimum lot size is 4,000 square feet. And in this case, it's 3,000. So that's just an idea if that's a path you're thinking of.
So you're saying that the lot size is insufficient for residential use too? Is that what you're saying?
Well, if it was a detached single family dwelling, the minimum lot size is 4,000 square feet.
But I'm not going for anything. I'm concerned and I'm deliberating and I'm stating my concerns in the deliberations to the commission. That's what I'm doing.
There used to be a dumpster out front, right?
In the right of way.
In the right of way.
We had to remove it as part of the coffee roasting approval because it was built illegally in the right of way.
Do we have space dedicated for another dumpster or?
Yeah, the arborvitae enclosure is a really nice screened area, so they get to put the trash there.
Or internally in the building.
You might correct an error here on page 79. It's probably not St. Helens Street.
Oh, I don't know. maybe-
Oh dang, I was hoping there was two L's, that would have been funnier.
Maybe they're hitting heels. Maybe that's
It was
heels.
just an N that was omitted. Dang it. If it was a mistake, I wish at least it was a comedic one.
Right. Someone ready to make a motion?
I move that we approve the application and do not require a fee.
Look at that. Sorry, Steve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed.
All opposed?
Nay.
Motion for signature? Motion for signature? Second?
I still gonna come by for coffee.
He doesn't get coffee.
He's doing his job.
I vote aye on that.
Charge him double.
Steve, I think it's good you're here, you know, like, you need someone to play that advocate. That's relevant.
I just hope this thing still, just to be honest, are we still on the record? I guess my hope is that it continues to look great and continues, as Jennifer says, to be this icon and that we don't have a headache.
Yeah, I do too.
So that's like, I got my fingers.
Yeah, no, I respect that.
Thank you.
Doing my best.
One last thing, the final written decision of the planning commission may be appealed to the city council. The notice of decision we mail to all persons who testify or submit comments, and appeal deadline will be included in the notice.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, guys.
Waiting.
How many more things do you have?
Two.
Oh.
You wanna?
I'll be used to that.
I love it.
On the Second Street house I had.
Made it off.
He made an offer on that Second Street house.
Oh, okay. Was that for his personal living?
So, yeah,
Because I know they live in Portland.
yeah.
He's got two children.
Oh.
Yeah.
Tarp shed.
Glad you held out.
Yeah, pallets of
People in hindsight. Deal too.
and that's stupid.
You know, like 3-0.
So much effort.
Easy 150.
It was on Great Cliffs Drive or this court.
Drive.
It was so.
Are you talking the second?
When I was begging,
Where's your problem, even when they're old?
I
buy this house, buy. She's a teacher. She's
It was larger.
Money is.
It was large enough right on the property line. Yeah.
Higher.
I don't, the motive. Yeah.
Mine.
Yeah.
So there is.
Glamorous world of cooling parks, man. Hey.
Well, I see some
So what I
tiny houses being constructed in lots, and I have,
So I should sell my.
yeah.
sold my duplex.
Okay.
for-
We're ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your patience. That's a discussion item.
That first picture I have on that.
This one? Oh, the new picture. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Sorry,
Okay.
landmark.
So you have this memo I provided to you. Yeah, yep. And I just, so I guess I want to see where you, as the Historic Landmarks Commission, are at in regards to the plaza. So first of all, let's back up. And we have a list of official historic resources in our comprehensive plan. And those resources normally are buildings, but they can be sites, objects, districts, and I think something else too. And for St. Helens, it's mostly buildings. We do have an object, one of our stone walls is a historic resource. And we do have one site, and that is the courthouse plaza, which is right outside our window. And the reason I'm bringing this up is when we have a designated landmark, and that's what our official historic resources are called, and it's going to be altered, then it's supposed to come before the Historic Landmarks Commission. And we're used to looking at buildings, they totally change windows and okay, that's alteration. Now, sites are a little bit different. Now, an alteration as defined is an addition, removal, or reconfiguration which significantly changes the character of a historic resource, and painting is not an alteration. So if we go back a little bit in time, well, first of all, the rules, historic preservation rules that apply to this weren't that strong until we became a certified local government around 2009. And I meant to look at the old code to show how bad it was, but I got too busy and didn't get to it. But there was a significant change. And so in your memo, if you look at some of those old photos of the courthouse or the plaza, well, let me back up. The courthouse was built and then the plaza was built right after it. And so same designer, so they kind of go hand in hand. And that's why the plaza is one of our historic landmarks, because the old courthouse is. If you look at those old photos, you'll see the raised center round piece, but then you'll also see kind of a crucifix pattern that extends this way. Now, if this Lewis and Clark thing was done when we had stronger rules, I don't know if that would apply, but it was done before we had those rules. And then on the other side, the flagpoles and stuff, I don't know how long those have been there, but in any case, we have those rules now. This is something the city put in, and for those of you who have been with us for a while, will remember that we went through the formal process to alter. Remember, alteration is a very important key word here, to alter this historic resource. And it was approved by the Historic Landmarks Commission, and all was good. The question are these two temporary sign wrought iron features. And I'm just, I'm not sure how to think about it. The footprint is very small. And so, okay, well, maybe it's not an alteration because the footprint is small. Now these are 12 foot tall, and so there is a visual impact. Anyway, so I'm just, do you think that's an alteration, or do you think it's
bolted to the concrete, isn't it?
It is bolted.
It's
Been
been
on an alteration.
been up for years now.
So it hasn't been there too long, and because we were so busy in the past, I heard about it a couple times. And we're finally getting to it. So and thank you for bringing these up. So here's where we are not too long ago. Oh, nice and sunny it was that day.
For scale.
Now, if you go back to the previous picture, this is when we were proposing to put the little kiosk thing in there. It just gives you, and of course, there's all these benches, but these benches were on the public right of way, not in the plaza, to just give you the visual difference of those. And it's kind of awkward because there's at least two people in here that have advertisements on there.
The big red one.
Yeah. But as a Historic Landmarks Commission, I guess my first question is, do you think this constituted an alteration and should be subject to your review? Or do you think it's minor enough because the footprint is small that, well, it doesn't substantially change it, not a big deal? And the other question is that, Plaza gets hammered now by Halloween Town. Halloween Town is great. A lot of cities would beg for that kind of attraction. But the Plaza, its surface takes a beating. And so there has been some discussions about what to do about that surface. And so that kind of you know, whoop, 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 alarms going off. Well, let's talk to the commission about this, just so we're ahead of any issues. Because tourism is a big force. Halloween Town is a big force. And that momentum get to a point to where, oh, whoa, wait a minute, let's not forget that any changes to this site need to be historically sensitive. So I guess the first question is, do you think these constitute an alteration or not? And if not, cool. I mean, that's, I could kind of go either way, and this is why I wanted to pick your brain about it.
When we
Put a sign
initially
there.
approved those, it seems to me,
See them.
yeah,
No,
but they just showed up.
you did not approve those. You approved the kiosk, the illuminated kiosk.
Yeah, okay,
And I was miffed when I saw them because I went through the process for the kiosk.
Yeah.
To have a public hearing.
that's why I was
process.
asking, it did
Yeah.
not see,
Yeah.
and when I first saw him, it was like someone put up a billboard.
Yeah.
2 of them,
That's what it feels like to me.
Can we?
they're just advertising.
Well,
I really wouldn't have minded if they were on the corners across the street. That would be one thing, but I don't think they belong on Plaza.
I don't think so either.
Now, you guys might be surprised by my opinion on this, because I don't think they belong there either. I'm paying for it.
That doesn't surprise me.
What are you paying?
Park preservation is so important to me that this plaza does not represent it any longer anything with what it looks like in the past. I've
I
seen,
think it needs to be
What do you pay for that?
changed back the way it should have been in the
it's
first
part of the
place.
city's
It was.
sponsorship. So,
It's a
Wait,
historical
the city
site.
gets
It
money?
should look like it did.
yes, it's a part of the city sponsorship. So,
Well, put it in front of,
Sponsorship of what?
it does. We pay marketing fee if
For
it's
the
to
Halloween
the city,
town, or-
yeah, for part of Halloween,
Oh.
town to be on. there.
It looks like clutter in the park.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, now,
that's what I'm saying.
Is it sponsorship for a Halloween Town event
It's a citywide for the entire
or
year.
for whatever? Okay.
Whatever it's
So I was thinking if it's for Halloween Town, bring them out and throw them up all over the place. Halloween Town. It's trash, it's already trashed by
Yeah,
Halloween
13
Town.
nights
so I think
too. If they could put them down next to that big ugly vendor village.
And I asked about. Want them in each of those little triangles on the road.
I'd like to see the plaza return what it looked like before, so if they're talking about wear and tear on the
1736-010.
green area, then if it resembles something like cobblestones or something, then great. You know, we have a long history of basalt block in town. If it's red shiny bricks, forget it. I mean,
And the discussion at the last council meeting, as we're trying to put together the new contract with E2C, we're trying to ensure that the new contract addresses issues of on what basis making sure that anything that is done goes through processes that anyone else is asked to do to put things up, but then also that we would have city staff would be doing kind of a before and after evaluation of conditions that exist, and storing things. And our contractor is very receptive since we are making money. Yeah, since we're making money, very receptive to, yes, that let's follow through and look at what improvements can be made, what additions could be made. But so long as it's done following the
one of the reasons the 13 nights is free is because of city sponsors, and each sponsor in there pays significant amount of money. So it's important, but we got the appropriate spot.
According to 17.36.010, I know Jacob read this earlier, but alteration means an addition, what we're talking about. So addition, removal, or reconfiguration, so this would probably be an addition, which significantly changes the character of a historic resource.
Something's bothered me for some time, it's actually when Halloween Town was filmed here, there was a lot more trees in the plaza.
Yeah.
And as they died, they just cut them down and replaced them. And I wondered why, you got this formal tree lined pattern and they weren't replaced. Weird.
Yeah, I wonder if these are trees or bushes, because if you look
Yeah,
at the
there used
bigger
to be a
one.
fountain in the center.
Yeah, it was a
In
fountain.
fact, I was here when Halloween Town was filmed here and they painted the trees,
Yeah.
it looked like autumn.
Yeah.
I lived here.
I mean, they don't look super huge in 63 or 83, but there are 8.
They look more tree-like.
Trees, yeah.
Yeah.
For a
So
long
you're saying
time.
these two
It
died?
should be, yeah, actually, there's more than that, there's only one on that side, isn't
Yeah.
I would love to see those awful signs that are in the piles at the frontage here. I would like to see them disappear somewhere.
Well, it sounds like
there?
there's a unanimous conclusion that those do constitute an alteration. And if that's the case, they need to be moved or permitted by you.
I mean, clearly they have to be bolted down if it's 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For safety, it's gotta be.
And part of it was, well, maybe it's just a seasonal decoration and they'll go away and
You think
when
that
I
this-
asked about it, that's not the response I got, so.
you think it significantly changes the character of the historic resource?
Yeah, it's an advertisement.
I think so, and it's
It's advertising.
Very
the
visual.
situation ugly.
Yeah,
If it was 1 foot tall, that might be different than 12 feet tall.
I mean,
Go to the effort of putting a sailboat on the top or something.
I was gonna
Isn't
ask
pretty,
you,
if there's a whole bunch of signs.
maybe a recommendation or something. Maybe ask them to take them down.
You just heard us.
Yeah, I'll have
I
to,
don't want them taken down because it generates money for the city, so I think we need to.
Well, I think they need to be put
If
elsewhere.
they weren't put up with,
Yeah.
they weren't put up following.
It's either
If they're for the
remove and put somewhere else or cut in and get
nights,
2 inches per year.
why isn't it down in the area where
It's for
13
Halloween.
nights is?
Halloween Town and 13 nights and 4th of July and, it's for everything, so.
And everything's down closer to the water.
I would, like I said.
The direction's clear.
yeah, this little patch of ground is sacred from an historic preservation standpoint, and that's why we're picking on
Just
it.
put them around in front of the city halls, the city's thing, it's their signs.
I'd like to see.
You're
them.
asking- What? Put it out there.
Like,
How much money do they generate?
probably wouldn't be
Related.
I don't know.
I don't think it matters, Steve.
They need to,
I don't know, I mean,
And in the world of sign code and historic preservation, our concern are the rules, not the revenue generated.
Yeah.
right, but we could permit it.
Eventually,
but that.
yeah, if,
That's not.
so, I mean, we'll have to see what the powers that be want to do to resolve it. But right now, based on the feedback I'm getting, we know we now have an issue that needs to be resolved either by removal, moving them, or permitting with approval by the Historic Landmarks Commission.
So are you gonna present this then to the city?
My plan was to make sure the city council is aware of these rules, especially when we talk about resurfacing and stuff. That way it's clear, oh yeah, this is an historic resource. Before we get too excited about something, we want to make sure that anything is done with historic sensitivity and it does need a permit.
Yeah.
So that there's just a higher bar for that patch of ground, basically. So I'll probably do that the next.
So when you showed the picture of the trash grassland out there, after a lot of people pounding on it, Portland has big events on the park next to the water, and they get trashed, and they redid the whole thing, sand layers, all kinds of ways to handle it, and we kind of redo it every year. So there's pattern. We know how to do it. People know how to do it. Portland does it Do they actually replant it every year or they?
Yeah, they replant it, they just regrade
Reseed it.
it all and plant it, and it comes up for the summer and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So it'll be done.
But they set it up with sand and.
And you wanna,
But I think in the overall plan, you know, if you brought the cross back and whatever, it'd be done, then that's the time to make an overall plan for the park.
Yes.
You know, that would be nice, but I think as far as addressing those signs, I think they have to go.
Yeah, so this is a good opportunity to talk about the signs and then talk, that way everybody's thinking in the historic context of, you know, restoring that surfacing, you know, for future.
How does it change it if they're temporary, that they just come out for events, they unbolt them and then rebolt them in for all the week?
And if I knew that was the case, then, okay, well, you know, it's because there's decorations throughout.
Yeah.
They come and go.
Yeah.
But
Well,
when I get the response that I did, okay, it's time to come here. Not playing games.
Jennifer, couldn't they even go like the insurance building, you know, the street? The end of it that's on Strand, or not Strand, First. The parking strip there. One could go right there, which would be visible both sides. I don't know where the second one, I've been trying to think where I would put that, but it would just be, that one would be just across the street.
Two-sided?
Yeah, they're two-sided.
Decide on that, know where they go, we just have to
Are there different people on each side or same?
be there.
Yes.
well, were you just, did you want a finding that they do constitute an alteration? Isn't that what you want?
Well-
Or not?
I'm seeing consensus.
Well, I know, but we can vote.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to vote for emphasis, that would be fine.
Fine then.
So you want a motion that
Do we
these
have a
constitute, the signs constitute an alteration and need to be moved?
Well, I don't want.
That would be-
Just that the
I
signs
said
called,
moved.
they need to be moved. Well, do we have to?
Well, the issue needs to be resolved.
Yeah, just resolve through permitting or moving or whatever.
If it's a,
Now, for Halloween Town or whatever. That generates.
6.
How much?
$30,000 minimum.
33,000.
A lot of money, so, I mean, I'm not sure that I wanna just, I don't mind saying it's an alteration, and then let's just see where it goes from there. See what the proposals are to try to,
yeah, there's a lot of ways it can be resolved, but the first thing is recognizing that it's an alteration. And that if things were done properly, that would have been reviewed by everybody, and if it was denied by the commission, well, they would have considered an alternative approach to it.
So we could say that it was not an approved alteration. So all we're actually talking about.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, we're all agreeing it's not an approved alteration.
I'll second that.
I did make the motion because I can't make.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All not in favor?
We get to work.
$500 a year.
Thank you.
Not hard.
What's
So that one thing, that one little piece.
Well, on all the advertising, so like.
Oh, well, that's, okay, but that's. It's not generating.
That's the strategic plan, development goals review.
Yeah, so I just. We've started doing these biannual strategic plan presentations to the council. And some of these things are things that the planning commission discussed. And so I figured, well, it's probably a good idea just to briefly cover them. So when we're talking to the council last October, this is from October, we kind of talked about generally the stuff that keeps us busy and the hierarchy as far as triage, juggling. This is what we do. And the first thing is current planning, entitlement processing. Someone wants to do something, we have to permit it. We have to permit it within a certain time frame. Usually that's 120 days. But there's also the customer service component. For several years, things were really backed up. People were complaining. Now we're efficient. So that always has to be the priority. And when the economy is good and there's a lot of development going on, this fills that cup considerably. So the next thing we have are the city projects, long-range planning, and that's to help our internal customers to help prevent issues, egg on the face, like we saw with the Bennett building. The Bennett building was just because of internal chaos. So much stuff going on, not optimum checks and balances. And so that's what we're talking about that. And then sometimes other departments have strategic plans that we need to help on. For example, the Parks Commission is thinking or pursuing a new Parks and Trails master plan, and so planning is going to lend some help to that. The other thing I mentioned were the planning specific strategic plan items. These are things like code amendments that we just work on internally, and the question is, how spread thin are we to be able to do those things? And then there's also other things, enforcement. What kind of issue just came up, and there's a fire to be put out. So that's just a general overview of things that we cover. Usually, you as the planning commission see stuff here and the long range element. So if we go to the next one. So back in October, we kind of thought, okay, what kind of things are we going to be looking at in the next 6 months? Of course, we're about halfway through that. And always current planning, permitting never ends. This is just training staff. It used to be 101 in Jenny's earlier days, for example. She's a lot more experienced, and so it's just more advanced training as things come up. These beekeeping rules, that's actually done. One thing that I mentioned at my staff report, this is housing needs analysis. So we had that big, huge batch of development code amendments that focused on duplexes. And then our housing needs analysis to work on cottage clusters and stuff. And back in October, I'm like, okay, the holiday season, that's the time to do this. And well, not this holiday season. There was a lot of other things came up. And then there was retirement and engineering. So I don't know when that's going to happen. And then other things on the strategic plan. We anticipated a subdivision, and yeah, you're going to see that next month. The subdivision we're talking about there. And then I talked about what other departments are working on, engineering with their water master plan. We needed to help them with that. And then back then we were talking about planning commission vacancies. Of course, we filled that. But the reason we put that on there is that takes time, advertising, interviews and stuff. And so it's just another thing that takes time. So that was the 6-month outlook back in October. In this case, which is kind of listing a lot of the things that we see potentially happening. And the one thing I wanted to point out on here is the typical threshold of a planner in a city is 1 per 5,000 population. And we've been hovering around 14,000 for several years. So we're going to be around this 15,000 for a while. And I also wanted to point out that planners are not always geographic information system techs as well. At the last meeting, I mentioned working on data, aerial photos, and that is a service that we help the city with. So we have this kind of longer list about stuff further out. 2027, we know we're going to have to do our next housing needs analysis then. And so, what I was hoping is to get that second batch of residential code amendments done. Then we don't have to worry about housing until, the state says we have to go back there. Flood code amendments. This is this biological opinion. Someday we're going to have to deal with flood code amendments as it relates to the Endangered Species Act, but that target keeps getting moved back. So The federal government, who knows when that's gonna happen? It's gonna happen sometimes. Housing opportunities analysis, that was done in 2009. That explores our employment lands, industrial, commercial lands. It's really outdated, and that would be a good thing to work on. And then, there's all kinds of stuff about things that we're looking at up ahead. So that kind of translated to, this is the strategic plan, the 2-year strategic plan list for 22-24.
Oh, sorry. There it is. I was trying to scroll.
And this is the near-term stuff that's kind of contemplated. I did this towards the end of the day, so it didn't get right in the order, but this is the long-term and this is the medium term. And so some of these things we have talked about as a commission, and there was some comments done last time where, well, maybe we should communicate better about, well, this stuff is still on our radar. We haven't forgot about it. And that includes well, we talked about residential, there it is, residential design standards. About windowless walls along streets. And I think that can be simple. One window per story of a certain size. It needs to be clear and objective. And, maybe if something simple can be figured out, it can be included with the residential code amendments that we've kind of talked about here. But I at least wanted to show you the list. I don't need to necessarily talk about it ad nauseum. But with the strategic plan effort, this helps direct what we're gonna do in the future, in some case, the long-term future. This is 1 to 2, up to 4, and up to 6 years, if I remember right. But there's some things that will interest you as Historic Landmarks Commission. One of those, and this is kind of low-hanging fruit for the commission, and this is historic resources inventorying. So potentially significant historic resources citywide. So when we were talking about the plaza, we talked about designated landmarks, and those are the official resources in the city. And when we became a certified local government, updated our code, there's the secondary list of potential historic resources. How many properties do you think is on this secondary list now?
Too many to count. None?
None, I would say.
Zero.
Nothing. And what that could do, well, so years ago, when we were, before some presentations from the State Historic Preservation Office, one of the things they said is, the first thing you do is inventory, because when you know what you got, that helps direct future efforts. So the secondary list, the good thing about the secondary list is it wouldn't need to be adopted into the comprehensive plan, which, okay, you have to make findings and all this stuff. It could be adopted with less effort. So as a Historic Landmarks Commission, that is something you could do, is think about, well, what properties would we want to consider? And that could have value later on. For example, let's say urban renewal is starting to grow and prosper. And you're recommending that the urban renewal agency have a facade program, and that some of that money goes to historic properties. If we have the secondary list, it may help us think about incentives, recommend people become historic landmarks, or maybe you have something that applies to those. A good example that we've talked about, Jenny and I, what?
Jerry Delish.
Jerry Delish. it's a great example. It's not a historic resource, but geez, it's a time capsule. And then, you talk about incentives and stuff, that's a whole other discussion.
Can I just interject here that
Yeah.
I feel comfortable speaking for the Columbia County Museum Association, the local historical society, that we would be happy to help in that project. Identify the properties.
When did we make the list of the first properties?
Did you work on that?
Yeah.
Did you have a big master list that you pared down to the historic properties? So it would be a secondary list?
I think we kind of brainstormed for a couple meetings. We took a bus and a short bus. Short bus.
It's a good place to start.
And we went around and the basalt houses stick out in Spainville.
And the people that wanted off the list, there was a large amount of people. That
Right.
wanted it. So in that, there really needs to be an educational piece for the community.
It does,
Say
it
what-
does.
Right.
People think they get on the list and, oh my God, I just lost all the rights I have to my house, do what I want, and this is not
Right.
true.
It's basalt.
Yeah, and so Restore Oregon has a educational piece prepared that I think that would help.
But that's been so many years ago, that should have been updated long ago.
And there is that secondary list from the 80s effort, but there's nothing formal in our books. That's
Yeah.
why currently it's 0.
Right,
And a lot of time has passed too.
right.
So that's just kind of food for
And a lot
thought.
of times past, some of the ones that are historic now.
Not contributing to or altered in a way that they're no longer significant.
They're-
That's true.
The ones that aren't so old are older than.
Yeah.
They fit the
You
criteria.
want to be 50 years old to meet the criteria.
That was 20 years ago.
Criteria. So,
So does Dairy Delish fit there?
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
We all are like, yes.
Yeah.
Safe, very delicious.
So that's,
Building in here.
One of the most endangered houses in the city is the Edwin Ross house, which was owned by Keith Locke.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's a very significant house in the city for local history.
I know that he went to Salem. Did he keep the house?
he still owns it.
Loves the house, yeah.
I imagine he will continue to still own it for the foreseeable future. I think his heart is wrapped up in it, but he wants to be with his family in Salem too.
You will see some stuff this year, which will probably,
Dismantle that idea.
yes.
Yeah, I,
Might have surprises, huh?
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that doesn't surprise me at all.
So I know it was kind of quick. It's getting late. I didn't want to, it's kind of a big list, but I just wanted you to be aware of that.
Do you want email? I mean,
Yes,
it wasn't in the packet.
It wasn't in the packet. No, I put it on the agenda and I wasn't sure how I was gonna package it. I'm like, well, I'll just figure it out when it gets closer to the meeting.
It's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
What do you-
So,
what do you want to
So
do
we
with
can send you that
stuff?
table,
yeah.
so you can kind of,
I would rather have paper than have it electronic. Just
Print it.
saying.
There isn't an action item on this one. It's more just
it's
FYI.
FYI. But yeah, if we can print you one, if you wanna come by City Hall and pick one up.
I appreciate it. Sitting at the computer and looking at it for a long while, my eyes get really tired.
That's why we print packets.
Does anybody else want a hard copy?
No. Not I,
But we're gonna get an
yeah.
We'll email it.
Yeah, but not a hard copy.
So that whole list, there's no order about it.
So I
Well,
do-
there's a short, medium and long term element to it.
I have a question on, another question. Can you scroll up to this resources of planning commissions? You say one planner per 5,000 population, that's kind of the rule of thumb.
It's a general, yeah.
Right, so we're really getting to the point where the planning commission, by definition, can use more resources.
By that metric,
Yes, and we're also in the process of moving forward with many different projects that health and safety projects, public work projects, things that are taking up your time. In addition to that, we've got urban renewal that's being developed moving forward. In addition to that, we have this riverfront development that is going historically change the face and community of St. Helens for generations to come. So when is the council going to be discussing adding another plan or two to our ranks?
So you would budget, the budget process is beginning. I know Matt Brown has been talking with department heads and all, but right now there's not a formal budget committee meeting scheduled until the end of April. But now is certainly the time for citizens and the public to be expressing their concerns to the council at publicly or through email to raise these issues so that they are on the table when the budget committee, as the budget's being formed, and when the budget committee formally meets.
And this, so the process as far as the budget committee is concerned is that a meeting of the budget committee is taking place at the end of April.
At least one, yes.
All right, at least one, and that's the next one, you think?
That's the only, right, as of this time, April 28th is the meeting that is of the first and only scheduled one of the budget committee. There is an alternative date if an additional meeting is deemed or requested by budget committee members to follow perhaps on the 5th of May or others, but the budget committee does have, as a body, does have the ability to request additional meetings, but at this time, that is what is currently being proposed. And Matt Brown, as our budget director, is the conduit communication through that. But my belief is that if you want the city as council members to be aware of what the needs and desires of citizens are, the planning commission, now's the time to begin to voice your, now's the time to express this to city staff, city administration, and to the city council.
So is the planning department put this together, you put this together, can you print it off in stone or something and hand it to the council, or make sure they have this kind of message that
Oh, yeah, this was a presentation to the council in October.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
this wasn't made for you.
Yeah.
No, we've seen this.
Great job, though. Right at the end of the meeting too is good.
We've seen this, and also with the adoption of the stormwater, the new stormwater master plan and the sewer master plan. There were recommendations by our consultants about staffing needs and things like that. So I mean, all of that has been brought to the attention of the council, and the budget committee, 5 council members and 5 appointed citizens. And I'd say that even though the official budget committee meetings aren't until April, I do believe that there's needs to be a lot of discussion and dialogue about this so that we can, so not just council members representing our own individual interests, but making sure that citizens and business owners express their needs, desires, or wants to be part of that discussion.
It's tough too, because there's, the police have their issues, it's citywide.
Sure, right, I'm not saying it's gonna be, I mean, we get an ultimate, and we do rely on our professional staff, on Matt, looking at the money. We have this pie, and the pie's not big enough. Okay, it certainly isn't big enough, because we can use another planner, we could use somebody else, probably in the building department, we can use more people in public works, we can use more police officers. We're not gonna get everything, but I do think that at the very least, it's important, not that residents come and, say that this is what we have to have, but at least bringing it to the forefront and part of the discussion for this fiscal, this upcoming year and for the future. So that at least it's on the table and it's being discussed publicly. So ultimately, some difficult decisions are going to have to be made, because we can't do it all, but it needs to be clear. And I do trust Matt. I've always found him to be very forthright and honest about what we do have, the money we have available, and that if we want this, then that means we have to take away from, this, because we have a limited pie. So I agree, we need to talk, it needs to be brought to the attention. I think you need to be advocating before the council, when the budget committee has its meetings. It'd be great to have people come and testifying and stating these things, but then again, realizing that, yeah, it's a limited pie and we're not going to be able to meet all of those needs.
Maybe we could get an intern, I heard those turn out well.
So,
AmeriCorps was good to me.
yes, AmeriCorps was good to us by getting you in the program.
Okay, so.
That would not be out of the budget, but.
There's a stipend award, but it's minimal compared to the work. I think I was working for $1 an hour.
Oh, it was more than.
Well, oh, you're right.
My daughter was in there. I know. I mean, it was more than $1 an hour, but it certainly wasn't what you.
His daughter was in the same program for I think the port. Yeah.
Oh no, for Cornelius, City of Cornelius. A couple years ago.
So how would we go to the council and tell them that we thought that would be a good idea?
How would
How we go to the council and ask
In that budget committee meeting?
Well, I would even no. Well, so I mean, but by then, frankly, by the end of April, I think a lot of the stuff is going to have been determined and I want to say finalized, but I mean, basically that's the document we're going to be working with. And if there were some changes, it would probably be a few dollars here, a few dollars there. So that now is the time, if you come to the public, you come to our work sessions, or you come to our regular sessions, we got the public comment time, the 5-minute time. Send an email to the to the whole council, or send it to John Walsh asking that it be distributed to all council members. So those are the ways. So your public comment time, you can also request, you could possibly request if you wanted a council member to ask the mayor to put an item on the agenda at a work session where you'd like to have, like on the agenda, 15 minutes or 20, I don't know, I put a time, to say that you would like the city council at a work session to reserve, put on the agenda. So to specifically have this as a topic of education and discussion for the council, you could do that.
And we could definitely, any of us served on that council for the last year or so, could have testified to how busy you guys have been. Hearings a night, work until 11 o'clock at night, multiple times. Just trying to keep up with the huge pile of workload that you couldn't get to, and so forth. Well, we've seen that. We know that's there. Any of us can talk about that.
I just struggle with it. It's just amazing to me that as a body, we have to go testify like any other citizen to the council or to the committee, that we can't as a planning commission.
No, I guess what I'm trying to say, Jennifer, I think you can, as a planning commission, do that by being on the being put on the agenda. That can definitely be done. your chair, contact Mayor Scholl and say, Mayor, we'd like to be put on the agenda to present this point of view or information.
Yeah, it's a bummer that the annual planning commission report to council is in, I think, June every year, which is, you know, post budget adoption. It doesn't quite align, but that would be an ideal time, because you have the floor as the commission to talk.
We can, yeah, I mean, that's a regular,
We could request to go before the council with our recommendations and our suggestions at any meeting.
Yeah.
We are a government entity that we can make a resolution and ask to be put on the council agenda and come forward with a presentation. Of course, council doesn't have to put us on their agenda, but I don't know why they wouldn't want to, so.
yeah, so you would contact Mayor Scholl or John.
So my observations as being new is that, and reading a lot of what has happened in the past is that we are blessed to have Jacob and Jenny as resources for the city.
Yes, very definite.
They are diamonds for the city, and the amount of effort they put in and their conscientiousness and their abilities are great. And I think one of the things of having really talented people is that they continue to be asked to do more and more and more and more. And there's, I think as Dan said, I think that there's a lot on their plate, and I think for the benefit of the city, providing more resources to the planning department, considering what we're up against and what we're moving forward with, is a necessity. And not to take anything away from Jacob and Jenny, but there's a lot going on with the city. And it's a lot for two people to continue to, and so at some point, there does need to be priorities of resources, and I agree with that. And I think planning is definitely a first priority, because you get one chance to get it right.
And I would say though, on the other hand, if we want to have a safe community, that in terms of the staffing of our police department, and actually a lot of, and again, not taking anything away from what Jacob and Jenny do with their work, but our police force is at a point where we need to really look at increasing. Right now, we're at about 20 sworn officers. About 10 years ago, a study was made for the population of St. Helens about 10 years ago, which called for 27 officers. In that time, we've grown, 3,000 to 5,000 in population. We're going to be opening an apartment complex that's going to bring in another 1,000. And we only have 20 we're having officers who are going to be facing retirement in the future. But we also, I firmly believe that because of what's happened with the pandemic, with officers who have been called to military duty, with officers who have been injured, that I'm really concerned of even keeping the officers that we do have. So I'm thinking in terms of if we're ranking them, the public safety and the health of our police department would even be above the planner. So I'm not saying do not bring the needs, your concerns to the council. I think it needs to be set. But I think when we do look at this, there's certainly some hard decisions, and that the safety of this community, which we rely on our police force to provide, I think is even a little bit higher.
Yeah, and the police, they have the same one officer per population figures too, which are,
It's never enough.
probably more shocking.
Yeah.
So it's tough. It's very tough.
Okay, well, I'm not giving up, so there you
No,
go.
no.
So,
Don't give up.
Let's keep on down the agenda here a little bit,
Sorry.
moving.
Sorry.
Getting late. Anybody have anything to respond about the emails and the planning? Development adjustments? Email? Or activity report for January?
One quick show and tell thing on the activity report. We're talking about system development charges. And that's not a fun topic for anybody, especially Russ.
I haven't seen them yet.
So we're discussing them, and I just figured, because I've been involved in the discussion, just helping feed them information and stuff. And so I saw this table, well, this is a good thing to share to the commission. Because sometimes developers will talk to you and system development charges. Developers don't like them because it makes things expensive.
That's paying for
This is,
structure and schools. and
yes,
all
it's
that.
paying for
Use any excuse.
capacity improving infrastructure. So we have a lot of like the riverfront connector plan, the corridor plan,
Columbia View Park.
Columbia View Park, the sewer and water master plans, all that stuff. So it pays for all these things. But at the other hand, it makes things more expensive. And one metric we use is the cost per single family dwelling, because that's something a lot of people can identify with. And this is where we're at currently. And when we look at all these projects, it's like, oh, man. And so there's the potential of being closer to Forest Grove, but is that gonna be politically palatable?
Stifling growth.
Yeah, so there's always that, so where are we gonna end up? And that's a tough that's a tough decision that the council gets to make. We're here, it's probably gonna go up. Are we gonna be with Scappoose? Are we gonna go up this far? I don't know, but I figured, well, at least share this graph. I think it's interesting. It's a good thing for you just to be aware of that SDCs are being discussed. There's gonna be discussions in future council meetings. And that's where we're at now compared with the other cities. It's just interesting, where we're at, below Scappoose and Columbia City.
I don't want to be like Vernonia. I've seen brand new developments with gravel.
That was my first question. Where was that town that Dan was talking about that had gravel streets? Of course. Yeah.
So this is just show and tell. This is a discussion that'll happen with the council further.
Designed with how much gravel.
That's one of many fees. That's just one fee of system development.
That is correct.
Well, I got a quick
Yep.
story.
That's correct.
I used to work in building in Seattle area. And then I became a consultant for wetlands work. I just starting. And our engineering firm I worked for was coming in on the year after King County put on the assistant development fees on new developments in King County. And it ticked off the developers so much that they didn't build anything in King County. They went to all the cities all around King County, and they went from 80 planners to 8. Wow, 1 year. And we were helping with the only development out of 4 for that year.
Well, that's the solution. Just jack the SCCs and then you don't need a planner.
I'll tell you,
I'll have so much time to work on anything you guys want.
but I'll tell you, if you go out to the city of Kent or something like that, you're driving in these farmlands, it's 2-lane road, and boom, you have this huge gated development with 100 homes there. And a 2-lane road and crappy lights and the schools on cubicles, temporary modulars. It was horrible. It was horrible, the places they went, because they didn't have system development charges. And they didn't have the money to do any of those infrastructure. And it was just a mess.
This is the term of affordable housing that you obsolete use now. That's the this stuff. Nothing's affordable.
Wilbur said, we're just gonna pass it down to the property.
Yeah, it's not an easy discussion.
It pay for it.
But it's something going on now, so I at least wanted to share.
You put all those people out there, they gotta get somewhere, they gotta put their kids in school. You did it, you should pay for that.
Well, if we went with Happy Valley, then we've got the right number of planners.
Happy Valley's growth.
What?
They got some considerable growth out there. I've talked to some planners, our subdivisions pale in comparison, so.
So Gresham is actually the 4th largest city in Oregon. I'm surprised that they're as low as they are, honestly.
It's a good point.
Yeah, Gresham's really, higher population than Hillsborough, Happy Valley.
You're hiring an engineer manager and
Yes,
3 engineers.
we had one retirement. Sharon Giroux took the engineer manager,
She's taking over Sue's place.
Different role.
kind of, it's been restructured.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No.
And then we hired an engineer too. His first day was Monday.
I think that's for now. They're talking about hiring another engineer 1 position, but that hasn't been. You said 3 other engineers. Well, just 3. Yeah, there was 3 job descriptions.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 job descriptions, but that not necessarily 3 positions, not
Just wanted
3.
to clarify, yeah.
It was done to provide for some professional growth and so even though it's 3 descriptions, not necessarily 3
Right.
people.
Yeah, Sharon, because, Sharon was the only person, and then our public works director, Mohammed, Sharon really had to put some extra time in to keep up.
Well, I've been talking to her on my project and
She's just been,
catch up with that because she said we're Sue leave off because I guess there's been a transition of information. And so
It was fairly sudden.
what's Mohammed do?
He's the public works director.
So he's not stepping out on any engine of Sue's projects or anything.
Well,
He's not part of that engineering.
not the hands-on, I have a question for our engineering department, no.
So that was something from the, or for information items section. So it's.
Yes, yeah, it was, I talked about in the planning department report, so. I gotta show the graph.
Anybody else have anything?
Okay, so for your information items, there are some planning commissioners have talked about trying to get more proactive and try to be involved in a little bit more advanced planning. The various things that are facing the city, there are a lot of issues that are facing the city. Planning commission can and arguably should be involved with. And so to help the council. So I wanted to bring, we have, it's getting late and that's one of the issues that we talked about is it's getting late, but Jenny, would you mind calling up the slide that I sent you one that had, I think it was, there it is. So the planning commission, and then can you scroll down to going powers and duties, and then can you just make that bigger? Just control, there you go. So basically what our code says, it's not a charter, it's a law. And what it says is that, can you scroll just a little bit? There you go. The powers and duties commission shall have the powers and duties which are now or may be, or now or may hereafter be assigned to it by charter, ordinance, resolution of the city and general laws of the state. Those duties and powers shall include, but shall not be limited to the following. There's 18 paragraphs of powers and duties, which are very broad reaching. And those are the responsibilities of the commission under the law. And And some of the responsibilities are to interact with the city council and to investigate, like we look at number 4, investigate and make recommendations regarding the implementation of the comprehensive plan as adopted by the city council. That's just one of the things. And there are other, I think that, you know, I've read it, we can all read it. I don't think we need to read it now. But there are, actually scroll down to number, I think it's 18. Study and propose in general such measures as may be advisable for promotion of the public interest, health, moral, safety, comfort, convenience, and welfare of the city and the area 6 miles adjacent thereto within the urban growth boundary of the city. So that's kind of an omnibus catch-all, if you would. And so there are a lot of things happening with the city. We've got urban renewal, which is going to be kicking into gear, which is $42 million of expenditures. And there's the waterfront development, and there are a lot of issues that are facing the city that the planning commission, hopefully, if we get involved in it, can aid the city in studying things, making resolutions, making recommendations, going to the council with recommendations. We are not a pass laws, but we can make findings. We're a government entity. We are a body that can make findings, and we can come to the city council and say, you know, we've looked at this. This is what we think. We can bring forward proposals. And so well, when the law says one has a duty to be involved, to me, I look at that as like, okay, that means to me that I should probably try and get as much as I can, reasonably can. And everybody has their own, you know, we're really kind of volunteers here. Everybody has their own limitations and what they can bring and can't bring. So some of the things that we explored at the last planning commission meeting was potentially another meeting. And I think that the challenge in meeting with Jacob and Jenny, and the challenge is that it is trying to not overtax our brilliant people when they're already being asked to do a lot. And as Dan said, I've been asked to do a lot of it. So, but I don't think that we should be shying away from the goal of doing more, because I'm of the opinion that the city could benefit from our help. Hopefully can. Hopefully, if we can bring more to the table as far as planning is concerned, that will be a benefit to the people of the city. And so, I just bring that up as a general discussion item. I do have something to propose in that regard, but I wanted to talk about it. Like, for example, Catherine. Like Catherine brought up, you know, what are concerns about parking in the riverfront development? You know, where are the cars going to park? It's one of the things that she was bringing up in this meeting. And you know, that's just one tiny aspect of the overall riverfront development that Catherine has a question about, that it's a legitimate question of a planning commissioner and would be a legitimate question of the planning commission. And there are a number of other issues. That's just one tiny example of being involved in the front end of the process, and being involved in having questions answered. So I'm thinking that we should try to work toward expanding our agenda. And how would we do that? And here it is 9:48 at night. And this was a pretty light calendar, I would think.
Not atypical and even busier can be that. For the most part, planning commission has been pretty reactive to what the planners need us to work on.
Right.
So we often don't have any extra time. Unless you wanna,
We have had meetings that have gone on well past midnight on occasion.
No.
well,
They end right before midnight.
just before midnight.
So,
Our coach never turns into a pumpkin.
I thought, you sure?
I'm positive.
So I appreciate your enthusiasm and the ability
That's
for the
true.
planning commission to do more proactive things and just like the list the planners had, they have a bunch of proactive things they'd like to put in there if they could, if they had time for. And, you know, maybe if we had a heads up that the meeting is gonna be a light meeting and probably an hour meeting, and you know, maybe we could slip in that special project that we might work on for some limited period of time, say for an hour, or some chunk of time that's known, so we don't go you know, this an unending meeting just keeps going on and occupies their time that they're paid for. And having another additional meeting, they're gonna have to come to, and the city's gonna have to pay for them to do that, have a room and all that kind of stuff. So there's all kinds of logistics behind having a forum, right?
Well, I think so, but I don't know.
We talked about that last month.
Right, we did.
And,
So in an informal discussion that I've had with the mayor between meetings, last meetings, I think we're agree that the planning commission as independent commission has the right to meet other meetings, so long as you're meeting Oregon, the Oregon statutes, open meeting laws and requiring things, but that does not, that, and the ability to meet, but without requiring the attendance of staff or staff. So that is, if the planning commission wanted to meet and was able to meet ORS and provide one of you or whoever to provide do the minutes of the meeting without having to have Christina present, is certainly a workable option. I believe you have that in that Kathy, but I think Kathy Payne would be the person to talk about, who could give you specifics on what the requirements are through the Oregon revised statutes to meet the public meeting laws in terms of providing notice, the proper public notice, and that the meetings would also need to be hybrid, allowing for in-person and Zoom capabilities. And if you're able to provide minutes, which can be more or less detailed, so long as they provide an accurate report of what's happened, that's certainly something for you as a planning commission to decide. You can do that. I just think that the thing is, as Dan was saying, I don't think we can reasonably expect our professional staff, our 3 professional staff, to come to regular meetings. But if planning commission members are wanting to take this on and figure out the means to do it and conform to ORS, that's certainly within your purview. And I threw that out to Mayor Scholl. It's just like, we didn't see that was an issue, as long as you're conforming to state law.
Have to be advertised to the public and signing and all that stuff, yeah.
If 4 or more of you are in attendance.
Yeah.
I'm curious why we wait till 7 o'clock.
I don't know why, I just, it's all been that
And
way.
could it be that the work session is from 6 to 7 and the meeting?
Well, it was great for me when I was driving from Salem, when
I'm just,
Well,
I find myself waiting around for the meeting, so I was curious why I didn't know.
Session,
Me too.
So, but
would that be easier? if we put the work session ahead of the regular session, so, we'll, you know, an hour or two special sessions.
Still think you're gonna be here for 6 hours in a row.
We're still gonna have to do it.
It's not, it doesn't take away from the workload, it just starts earlier.
Yeah. Longer.
Right, so this is gonna mean extra work. When is it gonna happen? If we want to meet as a commission and I, you know, I think that. So there's really kind of, one issue is, do we wanna meet more? And if we do, then, okay, how do we do it? There's another thing is just, maybe we could meet in subcommittees too, which would mean only 3 people, 3 planning commissioners could be present at any one time and meet on subcommittees on different areas. And I'm not sure how that would work and how we would be able to, investigate, but that could be something that we could look at too.
But I guess when I'm seeing all these things we can do, but if there's no purpose in doing those, or no goal or no outline of this is the goal we're gonna do something about as a planning commission,
So
it
it's,
doesn't really mean anything.
so one low hanging fruit is the secondary list of historic structures.
Yeah, that's one,
You
but
talk
there-
about 1 or 2 a time, and so yeah, that's one example.
Yeah,
It has a specific purpose and can easily be divided into chunks.
yeah, that's one thing we could do. That's for sure, and that's something that's right in our wheelhouse. There are a number of things that that I think that I certainly, as a planning commissioner, have an interest in understanding what the direction the city's heading in, and making sure that there are structures in place, and maybe they already are, to ensure that the kind of development that's going on the riverfront is going to be the type of development that people have envisioned in the master plan, for
Well,
example.
what I understand is if you have a subcommittee that meets together, the 3 people, how do you learn that stuff? Talking to each other.
Right.
Those extra meetings on what do you do? If you really want to know what the city's doing, you know, go talk to the city.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna propose that we put on the agenda how another meeting is, that we explore an additional meeting, because there are items, and if you want me to bring them up, I will bring them up. There's HB 3115, which is an extreme challenge the city's facing, that the planning commission should definitely be participating in looking at, on solutions on how that is going to be approached, and how we look at it is something, and that's how to implement that HB 3115 and to look at the laws, which is a land use decision. That's one thing, and then another thing are, what are the priorities of the development of the riverfront property, and what should they be, and should the priorities of development be housing? Should the priorities of development be a hotel? What should the priorities of development be for the city, and how do we make those priorities of development? How can we achieve them, or at least how can we make the recommendations for them? And those are things that I would suggest would be on our agenda items, and that we would then explore those things, and we would make findings. I'm just saying that if we had those things on our agenda and we had them as discussion points, one of the things that I looked at is our architectural standards. There's a great deal of work and tremendous document for architectural standards, and there definitely is there are good guidelines for architectural standards as far as the riverfront development is concerned. But there's a lot involved, commercial below and residential above. And I don't see a lot of architectural standards for housing. So the question is, should we moving toward augmenting those architectural standards to add architectural standards for housing? So that when there are development plans that come through, we can say, hey, we have architectural standards for housing. And these are them, and this is how, so that, I think, something that Russ had mentioned to me, there's some town, what's the name of the town?
Oh, Leavenworth, Washington.
Leavenworth, Washington, I have not been there, but. I mean,
It's an alpine town architecturally, you can't build anything with that. But
Or
that's-
Solvang, or there's lots of those towns that are very.
Yeah, that's extreme.
Right, but they've been able to implement some kind of design standards, so these are the kinds of things that we could put on our agenda and start working on. But you know, it's 10 o'clock right now, and so when would we take on these extra things, and how would we discuss them, and how would we bring these things forward?
Well, I'm actually gonna ask the planning commission if you're interested in adding more work to your planning commission.
Not particularly. I think that we're doing what comes to us and we're doing it well.
Well, yeah,
It's a mixed bag of tricks because I'm gonna be off the commission. End of the year.
oh, yeah,
I don't see myself.
oh, you.
I want to be more involved and I want to more partner with these guys because they're great. And I just think if we could be more involved with what's going on rather than, it's such a divided line of like, well, here it is. And we've got to not only come up to speed, but not don't know why we're here. I would like to get more involved.
We already know you do.
Thank you.
Well, I agree that it needs to be more involved, but I'm kind of like Sheila. I'll be off at the end of the year.
Well, you could be part of the change of having a more involved planning commission, that would be.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I think after 19 years, they'll probably tell me I can't.
It's not that we don't want to be involved, but
Well, I think the idea is that we make a process moving forward so that the planning commission transforms itself
Yeah,
into a more proactive body. That's the process that we're discussing whether we undertake. And then we definitely want to help, don't want to hinder it. And if we take on proactive things, that means we're gonna do the work.
So I hear those things you were mentioning, and I'm thinking, is that the council's position, or is it the project manager's position at the city, or the city manager, or someone else that really has that role already? And
Technical staff.
why are we inserting ourselves into their business? Number one, we can help, but you know, it's really our place to say, we're gonna design the riverfront because it needs to be done by me. If you're already doing it, but I need to do it. That's what it sounds like.
Well,
That would be uncomfortable for me.
okay, I can tell you what the law says our duty
First
is.
of all, you have to know if it's already being done. You're already saying you do it, you don't really know if the city's already doing it. You're assuming they aren't, because it needs to get done.
Okay, well, why don't you ask?
I don't have that burning desire. I think they're doing a great job.
Did I say they weren't doing a great job? I started off by saying they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
And I guess when it comes to spending $42 million and potentially having a debt of $62 million, and then another $16 million on top of that, and the law says that I have a duty to investigate and to advise the city concerning the implementation of the plan, that's what I'm gonna do if I can do it. That's what the law says my job is. And so I'm not here to say anybody's not doing their job or not doing their job. So as a matter of fact, I started by saying that the people we have are exemplary doing their job. What I'm saying is that I think we can help them. There are a lot of challenges ahead. And that there are complex things coming up. And I think there's a role for us to help them. That's my sole purpose in doing this.
So I'm saying, how much I want to do.
What about, you're answering your question?
I don't want to have that extra time. I don't have that kind of time. I've chosen to be part of some projects. I did the river project. I did that on my own time, I took vacation time, I did all kinds of things, so I could be on that, something I really wanted to do. And I'm willing to do that again. And I think I would encourage you to do something like that too. You could do that on your own volunteer time like I did. I didn't have to involve the whole planning commission to do that. I got involved and I got very involved. I had a lot of input. This is what just everybody else in that TAC did. Maybe there's a TAC that you can be involved with to have a personal influence on that.
I think I've done a lot with personal influence so far.
Yeah.
And I don't know, to me, it seems like a natural planning commission to be involved in planning. To me, that's what the name of the commission is.
It is, there's just limited time and people will want to do that. It's 10 o'clock and I want to adjourn the meeting, and so I'd say it's adjourned.
Well, hang on one second. So I don't know if there's this.
I'm not trying to catch up, it's just, it's fine.
I'm with you. So
But I don't want to have a meeting like last meeting where we went on and on and on, talking about stuff.
okay,
I'm
so
just gonna
I
have to
say,
stop sometime.
all right, so I say we propose that we have an agenda on our next meeting
Okay.
to explore how we can move forward as a proactive planning commission, and whether that involves an extra meeting or not, that's something we're gonna look at. When would the meeting take place? How do we staff it? And if it can't be staffed, then I think that's one of the reasons that we need to go to the council and say, hey, look, we need more resources in planning. And that potentially could be one thing. But I am saying that I'm proposing that we have on the agenda for the next planning commission meeting, that we have a subcommittee, and that committee comes forward with different options on how the planning commission could be more proactive. How's that sound?
I like that.
Okay.
What's the agenda like for next month? Is it full?
66 lot subdivision.
Yeah.
It's like a pretty good time to add something.
No.
Subdivision.
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, no, we haven't done the notice yet.
No, that's notice goes out next.
There's gonna be some testimony for sure.
That's the one over.
It could,
Off the Allen Road.
it could go at least till 10 or more, just what.
One.
All right, let's put it on
9th and 8th Street.
I don't want to push things harder than they need to go. And I'm taking your cautionary note of going slowly last
I
time.
know.
And
I really
so-
like your enthusiasm. I'm glad you're on the committee. But too much onto the planning commission.
Well, let's put it
Take
on
a little
the-
bits at a time.
all right, so let's put it on the agenda. Let's put it on the agenda for April.
Well, I mean, who's to say there won't be another I think just put it on the agenda next time, and if we have time.
Yeah.
We feel up for it. We've pushed things off to the next agenda if we run out of time, for example.
So
Yeah.
who wants to be on the subcommittee to make this exploration?
Well, I think that's a discussion to have at the next.
That's the agenda. That's the agenda.
Yeah. at the
It's
agenda.
really helpful to read this though, since this was before my time on there.
Okay, good, I'm
Oh,
glad.
good.
Yeah.
That's great.
To see what, and I mean, I appreciate what you
Dan?
did too, Steve.
As part of this
No, because I'm
process.
qualified as,
You and I are gonna have to.
obviously engineers and engineering firms have been, involved in it, so as me, as a citizen, I'm not,
Thank you.
like.
Good.
qualified to- But it was really helpful, so if you guys haven't read this again, even though it'd be refreshing.